Chapter 101 Werewolves? Chen Luo's interest. Then tell me about all the information about you in Europe. Chen Luo sat down on the sofa beside him, looked at him with a half-smile. Craven, you are a smart person. You should understand what I want to know?
Yes.
Craven's heart trembled, and he didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest, and quickly explained to Chen Luo in a respectful voice. As for why Chen Luo didn't kill him in the first place, Craven had already guessed in his heart. Judging from the various deeds of the other party during this period, there is no doubt that the other party has definitely become interested in the blood-sucking council on his side, and it is likely that, like the Mosquitoes' kingdom in the northern bear country, they want to take it over for oneself. If someone else confided this idea to him, then he might scoff at it. But if Chen Luo had this idea, he had no doubt that the other party had the ability to do it. For hundreds of years, the vampire forces in this world have been divided into three places. One is the vampire force of America, because there are the largest number of vampires gathered here, and the strength of the 12 clans is almost the same. They check and balance each other. It gave other small and medium vampire families room to develop, so the vampires here have not been able to complete the unification for hundreds of years. As for the other two forces, the northern bear country was migrated from the vampire forces in America. Both sides have a common ancestor, but the vampire forces on the northern bear side are not as large as the former. Therefore, the Mosquitoes family was able to take advantage of the situation and successfully establish a dynasty. The last vampire force is formed by the European Vampire Council. Unlike the first two forces, the source of this vampire force is caused by other reasons. Hundreds of years ago, under the influence of an unknown plague, an immortal man named Alexander Corvinus was accidentally born. A few years later, 3 offspring with his immortal blood were born. Except for the third son, the eldest son Marcus was accidentally bitten by a bat and became the first vampire in European history, while the second son William was bitten by a wolf and became the first werewolf in history. The origins of vampires and werewolves in Europe. After becoming a vampire, Marcus found Victor, who was still a human lord at the time, and transformed him and his soldiers into vampires. As a condition of immortality, Victor also accepted Marcus' request to stop William continue to wreak havoc. After transforming into a werewolf, because William couldn't control the anger in his heart, he often attacked humans, and the humans bitten by him would be assimilated into a werewolf who was mad and irrational in a short time, following the instinct in his heart, and then to attack other humans. It is precisely because of this terrifying contagion that the number of werewolves increased tens of times in a short period of time. In order to prevent this situation from spreading, Victor led a group of vampires to arrest William and seal him permanently. Later, due to an accident, the first rational werewolf in history, Lucien, was born. He could freely control his body and freely transform between werewolf and human forms. After seeing his characteristics, Victor immediately ordered him to be infected other humans, thus transformed into werewolves driven by themselves. This situation lasted for decades. Because of an accident, Lucien defected from Victor and liberated the rest of the werewolf slaves together. After defecting, Lucien, as the leader of the werewolves, fought against the vampires for hundreds of years, and this situation has continued until now. In the apartment, Chen Luo quietly listened to the other party's narration, compared the plot with what he knew, and found that it was not different from what he said, and he also faintly made some judgments in his heart. It doesn't sound like a lie. Knuckles knocked on the table, making a pause. Chen Luo raised his head and looked at the other party, with some kind of luster in his eyes, and said slowly, "But, I think you forgot to say something else? For example, the werewolf leader, is he still alive? I heard that it was you who brought back the evidence of Lucien's death, and that's why you can sit in today's position. You said, should I believe this news?" Hearing this, Craven's face changed instantly, and his eyes suddenly became a little flustered. After a moment of intense inner struggle, Craven gave a wry smile and said in a low voice, "Sure enough, I can't hide it from Mr. Chen Luo. That's right, Lucien is not dead. We reached an agreement at the beginning. I used the news of the other party's fake death to take my current position. In return, I will try my best to help cover up the whereabouts of the werewolf, discovered by others." Is that so? Chen Luo thought for a while, and then continued to ask, "How long has the agreement between you two been going on?" "Almost 300 years. 300 years? Chen Luo's eyes lit up, and he asked, "So, the number of werewolves should be quite a few now, right? This should be like this." Craven's expression froze, and he replied with some uncertainty, "Very good." Chen Luo nodded in satisfaction, thought for a moment, and then said casually, "Craven, tell me, if I want to meet this werewolf leader, can you help me?" Hearing Chen Luo's irresistible tone, Craven was taken aback for a moment, then quickly realized, as if thinking of something, he asked with some uncertainty, "Master Chen Luo, do you want to subdue those werewolves? If it's possible." Chen Luo didn't deny it, and immediately nodded to admit it. After listening to Craven's story, I have to say that Chen Luo also became very interested in the werewolf race. Since the opponent has been able to fight vampires for so many years, their strength must not be underestimated. In addition, since the opponent can be tamed by Victor 0.3, it means that there is a possibility of submission. Chen Luo might not be interested if it was the irrational werewolf at the beginning, but for today's werewolves, Chen Luo is in a shortage of manpower, so he definitely won't refuse. But all of this will not be known until he meets the werewolf leader. If the other party agrees, it's fine, but if he refuses, then don't blame me for finding a werewolf leader again. Thinking of this, Chen Luo couldn't help showing a faint smile on his face. After seeing Chen Luo's smile, for some reason, Craven suddenly felt huge amounts of fear, and at the same time became more and more awed by Chen Luo. Chapter 102, The Last Vampire Kingdom, Departure. Then, after sending Craven out, Chen Luo invited Blade in again. What? You're going out again? Hearing Chen Luo's plan, Blade raised his eyebrows, his eyes suddenly became fierce, and said in a low voice, Then what do you mean? You're going to leave this mess to me again? Looking at the other party's unkind eyes, Chen Luo laughed, patted the other party's shoulder, and said encouragingly, Now it seems that's the only way. Who made you the strongest in the family besides me? What's more, you have some experience in dealing with it before, and I can only rest assured if I leave this matter to you. After a pause, Chen Luo's expression gradually became serious, and he said in a deep voice, But I assure you, this is the last time. When I come back from Europe this time, the two vampire forces in Europe and the North Bear country have also been unified, and the only ones left are the few here. The family needs to fix it. When I bring back enough people from the 19 side, I think we can start attacking these families. Hearing this, Blade's originally impatient face instantly became excited, his eyes sparkled, and he said impatiently, It's not impossible to ask me to promise you, but after you come back from Europe, don't make any more moves, and the rest of the families will be handed over to me. Speaking of this, as if thinking of something, Blade subconsciously rubbed the long knife on his back, looking forward to it. It just so happens that I also want to see. What kind of power can I get with the latest power? Is that so? That's not bad. Hearing this, Chen Luo showed a smile on his face, nodded slowly, and said, Then it's decided. At the same time, European Vampire Headquarters, the old castle where the elders sleep. Just the day after the party just ended. Following the news that came back from the far north, everyone in the entire castle fell into a commotion. Erica, are you kidding? Craven is still alive? In the living room, a group of people gathered here, surrounded Erica, and asked impatiently, That's right. I've already received a call from him just now. In the middle of the crowd, Erica nodded heavily, her face full of color. Eva's divination is indeed correct. Craven really survived. At this time, someone suddenly thought of what Eva said yesterday and couldn't help turning their heads, looking in the direction of Eva, their faces full of surprise. What's so strange about this? Eva was born as a witch, so it's reasonable to take some possessions. Even though he said so, there was a hint of awe in the eyes of everyone looking at Eva. Eva joined in 100 years ago, and from the very beginning of joining, she showed her powerful strength as a witch to everyone, including Amelia, who was one of the 3 elders at the time, was not the opponent of this witch-turned-vampire. Therefore, even though the opponent hadn't made any moves over the years, no one dared to do so. Underestimated. And for so many years, except for a few people, including Erica, who were able to maintain a good relationship with her, everyone else treated Eva with a respectful attitude. Fortunately, Eva didn't care about it, and she didn't see any other plans for so many years. She just lived in this old castle and rarely went out. After hearing everyone's words, Eva just smiled and said nothing more. But when no one else noticed, a gleam of light quietly appeared in her eyes, and her heart became more and more expectant. At this time, Erica suddenly seemed to remember something and said again, By the way, I remember that Craven said just now that he was able to survive this time because someone rescued him at that time. It was because of his help that Craven was able to escape from the butcher's pursuit smoothly. So as a token of appreciation, Craven will bring him with him when he returns. Speaking of this, Erica was very grateful to the kind person who had never met and helped Craven. It turned out to be like this. No wonder that guy Craven was able to escape from that butcher. Hearing Erica's explanation, everyone suddenly realized, and they were also moved by the helper who could save Craven from Chen Luo. She became very curious, and immediately asked curiously, Erica, what's the name of the person who rescued Craven? I remember Craven calling him Chen, Christian, Chris, Chan. Hearing this name, a mysterious smile suddenly appeared on Eva's face in the crowd. She couldn't wait to see this upcoming good-hearted man. But what Eva didn't notice was that at the moment when a smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, right next to the window, there was a gaze that inadvertently noticed this place. What is different from others is that this figure is dressed in a black leather jacket that is the same as that of the Daywalker. She is exquisite and slender, and the black leather jacket is worn on her body, which perfectly outlines her perfect curves. Short chestnut hair with drop ears, as well as that flawless and beautiful 993 face, just standing there quietly, all give people a fatal attraction. Different from Eva's amorous feelings, what she exudes is a rare heroic spirit. Coupled with those sharp eyes, she looks like a rose with thorns, dangerous and beautiful. She is one of the three elders, Victor's adopted daughter, and also one of the most powerful elite fighters among the Daywalkers, Serena. And she is also one of the few people who has a close relationship with Eva. Based on her understanding of Eva, after seeing the smile on Eva's face, Serena knew that it was because the other party had become very interested in someone. Performance. So, who will it be? Craven or? As if thinking of something, Serena, who didn't want to pay attention to Craven's return in the near future, also suddenly became interested. Then another day passed. That night, with the roar of huge amounts of engines, the plane gradually landed. Immediately afterwards, two figures slowly walked out of the plane. He raised his head and looked at the somewhat gloomy sky above his head. The light rain continued to fall, as if it had never stopped. After several hours of flight, finally, Chen Luo and Craven arrived at their destination smoothly. Chapter 103 Lovely Erica, a new choice. Turning his head and looking around, Chen Luo said with great interest, "Is this your base camp? It looks really suitable for vampire activities." Jianyo Country, as the location of the European vampire base camp, the climate conditions here may be a bit uncomfortable for ordinary people, but for vampires who don't like the sun by nature, it is perfect. If in America, vampires generally only come out at night, then here, as long as the sky is still raining, it will have no effect on vampires. And it just so happens that because the weather here is always cloudy and rainy, European vampires can also freely haunt the outside world. If it weren't for the fact that the vampires here have already been unified by the council and reached an agreement with the high-level human beings, if they don't hunt and kill humans at will, I'm afraid it has long been targeted by humans. In this regard, Craven replied with a humble smile, "This kind of weather is indeed suitable for us to walk outside, but for you, Mr. Chen Luo, it is dispensable. After all, you are the same as that blade. Daywalker." Speaking of this, Kai AI couldn't help showing amazement on his face. In that battle back then, because he fell into a coma too early, he also failed to see Chen Luo's fearless performance of the sun. It was not until later that he learned about this incident during an unintentional conversation among members of Chen Luo's family. After hearing the news, he couldn't help feeling a little more in awe of Chen Luo. After all, as far as he knew, Chen Luo's strength was already terrifying. After seeing Chen Luo's strength with his own eyes, he had no doubts about Chen Luo's previous achievements. Thinking of how many people died at the hands of Chen Luo, Craven no longer had any thoughts of fighting against this legendary butcher. Possessing such a terrifying strength, plus eliminating all the weaknesses of being a vampire, this is the first time he has seen such an existence in his hundreds of years of life. There is no doubt that with the opponent's current strength, even if the three elders join forces, they will never be his opponent. And the moment the opponent sets foot on this land, the fate of all vampires and even all werewolves is gone. In their hands. In this regard, Craven, who Chen Luo came here for, had already expected it. Now that he has foreseen the future of vampires, Craven definitely does not want to be buried with him. Therefore, long before he set off, he had already made plans in his heart. After walking out of the airport, a black sports car with a very cool appearance stopped in front of them. As the car window opened, Erica's beautiful and moving face appeared in front of the two of them in the driver's seat. "Craven, you're finally back." Seeing the familiar figure in front of her, Erica's face was full of smiles. And after seeing Erica, Craven's eyes flashed a rare softness, and he said softly, "I'm sorry, Erica. I made you worry." Afterwards, Craven seemed to think of something, turned around quickly, and respectfully said to Chen Luo, "By the way, Big Chris, this is Erica, my real sister." Sweeping thoughtfully over the two, Chen Luo showed a smile on his face and greeted each other. After seeing Craven finally come back, Erica, who was relaxed, had time to look at Chen Luo, who was beside Craven, and when she saw the whole picture of Chen Luo, her beautiful big eyes lit up instantly. A handsome face, even wearing casual clothes, can't completely conceal Chen Luo's perfect figure. There is no doubt that Chen Luo perfectly conforms to all her aesthetics just from the outside. Coupled with the fact that the other party is her brother's savior, Erica couldn't help but feel a little better. During the process of driving the two of them home, there were even several times when she chatted too much with Chen Luo, so invested that I forgot that I was still driving. As the vehicle almost overturned several times in succession, Craven was so frightened that he immediately asked to change his own driving, and the situation finally improved. "Really, Erica, how many times have I told you? Don't bother talking while driving. I didn't expect that after decades, you still can't change." Hearing this, Erica, who was not convinced, puffed her mouth and forcefully defended herself. "How can you blame me? Obviously, it was fine when I drove it by myself. I think it must be because you were too heavy. It was crushed, so there was a problem. Hearing this lame reason, Chen Luo on the side couldn't help it and laughed out loud, looking at the pretty face beside him, feeling amazed in his heart. He also didn't expect that they are all a family. As an elder brother, Cleven is extremely shrewd, but as his own sister, Erica is unexpectedly cute and cute. This is the first time he has such a type. See you. For such a character, Chen Luo got along with him unexpectedly harmoniously, and the two of them talked constantly along the way, and they didn't stop until they finally reached their destination. Okay, here we are. Hearing this, Erica came to her senses and turned her head to look out the window, blinking her eyes in surprise. Is it here so soon? Why don't I feel anything? Maybe it's because we got too involved in chatting, Chen Luo said with a smile. Really? Erica's face was slightly pink. She glanced at Chen Luo's side face quietly, then quickly turned her head and began to change the subject very bluntly. By the way, Chen, this is your first time here by the way. Let me show you around. Chen Luo didn't refuse, and Nuoma's replied with a smile. Then I will trouble you. Afterwards, the three got out of the car together, with Cleven leading the way and Chen Luo walking behind. And just as he stepped into the gate of this ancient castle, the next moment, a familiar voice sounded from his ears. Ding! It is detected that the host has come to a new environment, and the selection is now open. Option 1. Kill Marcus, the ancestor of the Blood Clan, and William, the ancestor of the werewolf, and absorb all their blood. Reward: transform into a bat. Randomly generate an ability. Option 2. Take Marcus and William. Reward: Ghost Wolf Bloodline. Hearing this voice, Chen Luo didn't stop in his footsteps. He followed Craven forward and began to think secretly. Just hesitation for a moment. Soon, he has the answer. Choose the first option, nephew. Chapter 104. The first meeting with Eva. Chen Luo, who understands the plot, naturally knows what kind of ghost wolf blood exists. The so-called ghost wolf is a new creature that combines the characteristics of both vampires and werewolves. This kind of creature has power beyond that of ordinary vampires or werewolves, and can even rival Marcus, the ancestor of Blood Clan, or William, the ancestor of werewolves. Moreover, it doesn't have the weaknesses of vampires and werewolves, so it can definitely be regarded as a bloodline with great potential. But in Chen Luo's opinion, this is nothing more than that. Whether it is physical fitness or other aspects, with his current strength, he has already far surpassed the blessing of the ghost wolf bloodline. Even after integrating this bloodline, it can still bring him a certain degree of improvement, but compared to the first as an option reward, it seems insignificant. Not to mention the unknown ability reward of the latter. The reward for the first bat transformation alone was enough for him to make up his mind. If he can obtain the bat transformation, he will undoubtedly obtain the flight ability. Think about it. If he had such an ability back on Skull Island, how could he still be trapped on the island? Months long? It can be said that as long as he has this ability, he will undoubtedly be much more convenient. Whether it is speed or flexibility, he will get huge amounts of improvement. Judging from this reward alone, it is much stronger than the so-called Ghost Wolf bloodline. Besides the 230 bat transformation ability, there is another ability reward. Although the effect of this ability is still unknown, but look at the abilities he got before. Which one is considered weak? Even if it is currently the least effective blood control, it is also related to his mental attributes being too weak. As long as there is a chance to improve the spiritual attributes in the future, presumably this unendowed will definitely have a huge amounts of effect on him. Under the temptation of these two rewards, it is not difficult to understand what choice should be made. Looking at the rewards displayed on the panel, Chen Luo is also in a good mood. He also didn't expect that he would have such a reward this trip. You must know that the last time he went to the North Bear Country, there was no system notification sound. It was a surprise. Could it be because of the different types of vampires? Such a guess could not help but flash through Chen Luo's mind. And just as he was thinking about it, at this time, the three of them had gradually arrived in the living room of the castle. Because they had received the news of Craven's return early, in the current living room, it was a day earlier. People are waiting here. Seeing that Clay, Sibf, when returned safely, all the people greeted him with enthusiasm and sent greetings one after another. Looking at their concerned faces, those who don't know may really think how good their relationship is. However, the fact is that, as Victor's designated agent, Cleven possesses huge amounts of power among the European vampires, even under Amelia, one of the three elders. It is no wonder that he is sought after by others. As for such a scene, Chen Luo didn't intend to go in to participate and followed Erica to the other side. After a while, he stopped in front of a big beauty with a hot body and top-notch appearance. Eva, let me introduce you to Christian. He is the one who rescued Craven. Arriving at Eva's side, Erica's cheerful voice sounded. Chris. Hearing this, Eva was taken aback for a moment, with an unpredictable smile on her face, and said slowly, So nice to meet you, Chris. Seeing her reaction, Chen Luo suddenly became a little curious, thought for a while, and asked tentatively, Look at what Miss Eva means. It seems like you've heard this name before. That's not true. Eva shook her head and said with a smile, but I remembered another name. Looking at Chen Luo, Eva paused and said, if I remember correctly, that butcher seems to be named Chen too, right? Hearing this, Chen Luo was slightly taken aback, and after a while, he slowly shook his head and said with a smile, is that so? Maybe it's just a coincidence. Even though he said that, in Chen Luo's heart, a trace of doubt quietly arose. In order to make it easier to move, he deliberately gave himself a new name before he set off, but judging by the reaction of the person in front of him, could it be that he was exposed? Maybe. Eva smiled even more, looked at Chen Luo for a moment, and then said again, by the way, I forgot to thank you just now. Thank you for bringing Craven back. Otherwise, Ellie, I don't know how long Ka will be worried. You know, she has been such an older brother since she was a child. At the same time, Erica also looked at Chen Luo gratefully and thanked, Eva is right, thank you Chris, if it weren't for you. I really don't know what to do. Erica at the moment was obviously a little excited, but she didn't notice the hint hidden in Eva's words. Although Erica didn't receive this hint, Chen Luo didn't. When he heard the other parties willing to bring Craven back, he already understood that the other party should know something. Taking a deep look at the charming beauty in front of him, Chen Luo asked with great interest, by the way, I heard from Erica on the road that before Craven came back, Miss Eva gave him divinated, and seems pretty sure Craven is alive. Do I know exactly how Miss Eva did it? Hearing this, Eva narrowed her eyes slightly, and the corners of her mouth curled up a little, which made her already attractive face look a bit coquettish. She stretched out her right hand, which was as white as jade, and her red lips parted slightly. Reacquainted look, Eva Kayla, a witch vampire. Witch? Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and then he slowly stretched out his hand and held the other's slender and boneless palm. His face was full of curiosity. I've heard a lot of legends about witches before, but this is the first time I've seen a real witch. After a pause, Chen Luo looked at the other party up and down for a moment, and Chen Luo sounded a little admiring. But Miss Eva's appearance is a little different from what I imagined a witch would be like. Hearing this, the smile on Eva's face became even brighter, and there was an astonishing coquettishness all over her body, which made Qian Hao's heart flutter. If it wasn't for maintaining the current state, I'm afraid I wouldn't choose to become a vampire. After all, I want to experience the feeling of bathing in the sun once in a while. After that, Eva looked at Chen Luo, blinked her charming eyes, and said slowly, I don't know my little wish, Chris. Can you help me realize it? Interesting. Looking at each other, Chen Luo smiled even more, and was about to speak. Suddenly, there was a slightly harsh door opening sound. Afterwards, Serena pushed the door open and entered the living room. Chapter 105 The Werewolf Changes. Chen Luo voluntarily asks for Ing. As Serena passed through the crowd, the noisy crowd fell silent for an instant. Hearing the movement around him, Chen Luo subconsciously turned his head to take a look. When he saw the figure walking towards him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of astonishment in his heart. The tall and slender figure, wrapped in black leather clothes, set off her perfect curves, the cold and astonishingly beautiful face, combined with the heroic spirit emanating from her body, added a bit of fatality to her appeal. Undoubtedly, in Chen Luo's eyes, this is a super beautiful woman who is not inferior to Eva in front of her in every aspect. Even Nisha and Erica are slightly inferior. Regarding this point, judging from other people around a year can be seen in the eyes of the other party from time to time. Seeing the visitor, Chen Luo's eyes sparkled, and he already had some guesses about the identity of the visitor. Serena, long time no see. How are you doing? Sure enough, when he saw the other party approaching, Craven's eyes suddenly lit up, and he asked with a smile, So you came to my welcome party too? Great. It seems you still. However, before Craven finished speaking, he was interrupted by Serena immediately. Craven, you came back just in time. I have something important to ask you. Deal with it? Hearing this, the smile on Craven's face stagnated, and he said, Can't we wait until tomorrow to talk about something? Tonight we can. Tomorrow will be too late. I just received news that werewolves were found in the Camden area, and there are a lot of them. I doubt what they might do there, so we have to act now. Serena interrupted the other party expressionlessly, looked straight at the other party, and said, So I want to apply to you to mobilize the Daywalkers to dispatch. Facing those werewolves, ordinary vampires will not be their opponents. Because Cleven was designated by Victor as the head of the family, so in terms of the transfer authority of the Daywalker, apart from Amelia, who is an elder, only Cleven has the greatest power. And the body as a member of the Daywalker, Selena usually has to obey the other party's orders. Therefore, after discovering the trace of the werewolf, she also had to find Craven, and only after obtaining his consent could she start the next step. Seeing Serena's indifferent attitude, Craven frowned, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. Although he did have a good impression of Serena, but the other party's behavior that did not give him face still made him unhappy. In addition to this reason, there is also a certain degree of tacit understanding between him and the werewolf. So after learning of the werewolf's trace from Serena, he also subconsciously didn't want to care about it. The effect of these two factors next, Craven just thought about it for a moment, and then immediately wanted to refuse. However, before he could say the words of refusal, a voice that made his heart tremble sounded from the side. "Sounds interesting, Craven, if you don't mind. How about letting me go and see?" His body froze suddenly, and he turned around slowly. What Craven saw was Chen Luo's smiling face. Although Chen Luo's face was full of smiles at the moment, Craven knew in his heart that if he dared to reject him, what kind of fate would be waiting for him. Therefore, after hearing Chen Luo's words, Craven's face changed instantly, with a smile on his face, and he quickly said, "That's definitely fine. Since Chris is willing to take action, it seems that I don't need to worry about this operation." After all, Craven's eyes subconsciously glanced in the direction of Serena next to him. With his shrewdness, he had some vague guesses about the purpose of Chen Luo's trip at this moment. With a slight pain in his heart, looking at Serena's beautiful face, Cleven already had a premonition at this moment. From now on, there will be no possibility between the two of them. Although it was a bit sour, he soon calmed down. After hundreds of years of getting along between the two of them, he had already expected it in his heart. Since the two sides have not been able to get together for such a long time, it is obvious that the other party does not have a good impression of him at all. The reason why he has been obsessed with Serena before may be just the unwillingness in his heart. Now, it is time to wake up. Ask for flowers. Sighing softly in his heart, Craven turned his head to look at Serena and said calmly, "Since you want to investigate the traces of the werewolf, then I won't stop you. But you heard what Chris said just now. If you want to go, you must bring Chris with you." Cleven, who knew Serena's character well, didn't give her any room to refuse, and said in an unquestionable tone. Hearing this, Serena frowned slightly and turned to look at Chen Luo. "You are the one who rescued Craven from the butcher? Although I don't know why you have this idea, but I want to remind you that werewolves are not something ordinary people can deal with. If you want to go, I have no reason to stop you, but you have to think about the consequences. If you die at the hands of a werewolf, you can't blame others." Hearing this, even Erica, who had never seen eye to eye with Serena, hurriedly stopped her. Looking at Chen Luo anxiously, Erica dissuaded, "Chris, those werewolves are really dangerous. If you are interested in werewolves, you can ask Craven to catch a werewolf back. So you still stay here it is." After saying this, as if to increase her persuasiveness, Erica turned her gaze to Eva's direction, and her eyes quickly signaled, "If you don't believe me, you can ask Eva for her opinion. You should believe what she says, right?" "It sounds reasonable." Chen Luo nodded, then looked at Eva's charming face, with a faint smile on his face and asked, "Then, Miss Eva, what do you think?" Facing Chen Luo's question, Eva was silent for a moment. With some inexplicable gleams in her eyes, she smiled lightly and said, "Actually, I think that with Chris's strength, if you go with him, there shouldn't be any danger." After that, Eva turned her head to look at Serena. The smile on the corner of her mouth became more and more obvious. Besides, if Serena encounters any danger, maybe Chris will be able to help. Hearing this, Serena's calm eyes instantly had a ripple, and she subconsciously looked at Chen Luo's handsome face, feeling a little curious in her heart. Chapter 106 Tracking, Finding the Target. Based on her understanding of Eva, Serena naturally understood that what the other party said also meant to remind her somewhat. As one of Eva's few friends, although Eva usually does not easily show her strength to others, she knows that Eva's strength is definitely far superior to her own. And not only in terms of strength, what convinced her the most was Eva's magical divination technique. Over the years, none of the things that Eva has predicted has been ineffective. Therefore, when she heard what the other party said just now, she subconsciously thought that it was Eva who had predicted something. Out of trust in Eva, she no longer had any objection to Chen Luo's previous proposal to follow her to find the traces of werewolves, and nodded in agreement immediately. "Then let's go now." After receiving the approval of 50311, Serena had no intention of staying any longer, and immediately started to act. After a short while, she had summoned all the Daywalkers in the castle together to confront Chen. After Luo said something, he immediately turned around and walked towards the gate. Seeing the other party's vigorous action, Chen Luo was taken aback for a moment, and couldn't help admiring him a little more in his heart, and didn't stop for a while. After waving his hand and bidding farewell to Erica and Eva, Chen Luo immediately took a step and followed. Watching Chen Luo's gradually disappearing back, Erica came back to her senses at this moment, with a little worry visible to the naked eye on her face. "Eva, Chris should be fine this time, right? Don't worry. His strength is definitely beyond your imagination. He's just a werewolf, and he won't pose any threat to him." Eva smiled and comforted him. After all, this is the legendary butcher. Seeing the direction in which Chen Luo left, the expectation in Eva's eyes became more and more obvious. She didn't know what to think of, and the smile on her face became more and more attractive. At the same time, Chen Luo followed Serena and her group, sat down in the same car, and then, with a roar of engines, several vehicles quickly disappeared into the night. Less than an hour later, everyone finally arrived at their destination. A group of people got off the car one by one and gathered in front of Serena. As one of the best elite fighters among the Daywalkers, coupled with her status as the adopted daughter of Victor, she also has a very special status in this elite army. Although there is no clear concept of superiors and subordinates among the Daywalkers, under normal circumstances, as long as there is no direct intervention of elders or Craven, Serena is equivalent to the direct commander of this army. Just like now, looking at the group of elite fighters in front of her, Serena said calmly. According to the news, the whereabouts of the werewolf appeared in the area around here. Everyone spread out to search. If you find anything, don't do anything, wait others come to support. Hearing this, in front of Serena, a group of Daywalkers all dressed in black nodded silently, then turned and left one after another. After arranging all this, Serena then set her eyes on Chen Luo and said lightly, "What about you? What are your plans?" Regarding this, Chen Luo shrugged his shoulders and said indifferently, "I'm not very familiar with this place. I think it's better to follow you." Chen Luo, who has understood the plot, naturally knows that following the protagonist is the most likely to find the trace of the werewolf. Even if he goes alone to search for it, I am afraid that besides wasting time, it will be difficult to gain anything. Instead of running around aimlessly, it is better to follow the other party, which is much more efficient than searching by yourself. Hearing this, Serena nodded lightly, and then seemed to think of something. Eva's words involuntarily resurfaced in her mind, which made her a little curious. "I heard that you saved Craven from that butcher. It seems that your strength is not weak. Otherwise, it would be impossible to escape from that butcher. I just don't know. What is the gap between your strength and that legendary butcher?" Huh. Hearing this, Chen Luo subconsciously turned his head to look at the other party, with a slight smile on his face. "What do you mean? You seem to be interested in that butcher? Why, yes, want to know more about the butcher from me." Regarding this, Serena nodded unabashedly. A trace of solemnity flashed across her face. Judging from the butcher's past deeds, this time he participated in the forces targeting the butcher's family and was severely retaliated by the other party. Only our side is temporarily spared because of our relationship in Europe. But such days will definitely not last for too long. I think it may not be long before the other party will launch revenge on us. So in order to deal with the other party's revenge, I must also learn more about the other party's intelligence. After saying this, Serena looked straight at Chen Luo with serious eyes. "And now here, among the people who have been in contact with that butcher, besides Craven, you are the only one. And that fellow Craven doesn't have the courage to fight that butcher, so if I want to know more, I have no other choice except you." Looking at the other party in surprise, Chen Luo didn't expect that the other party knew him so well, and knew how to take precautions in advance, although her actions were useless to him. After all, she didn't know that standing in front of her now was the butcher she wanted to guard against. While feeling a little funny in his heart, Chen Luo also pretended to be serious, thought carefully for a moment, and then slowly opened his mouth and said, "Butcher, if you want me to say it, I think there is a relationship between us. The strength should not be much different. If we fight head-on, we should be able to draw." In his opinion, there is nothing wrong with Chen Luo's words. After all, the butcher Serena is referring to is himself. If he fights with himself, there will definitely be no difference in strength, so the conclusion of 4.5 Chen Luo is also true. Very well founded. Not so for Serena. Hearing Chen Luo's answer, Serena frowned. Although there was no expression on her face, her impression of Chen Luo was greatly reduced in her heart. You must know that the butcher's deeds are there, even if she has never met him. In Serena's heart, with the strength of the butcher, she is definitely the strongest existence she has ever seen. In such a terrifying existence, the little-known guy in front of him actually said that he was sure to deal with it. What else could it be if it wasn't just talking big? Thinking of this, Serena no longer planned to ask Chen Luo, and silently turned around and began to look for the werewolf. And she didn't know whether it was luck or something. But after searching for it for a while, suddenly, her eyes narrowed, and she suddenly found out. Chapter 107 Attack, Shootout. At this moment, Serena and Chen Luo are standing on top of a tall bell tower. Ascending and looking down, relying on keen vision, pedestrians on the street came into their eyes one after another, but because of the light rain, most of the pedestrians were holding umbrellas, which properly blocked part of their sight. Her eyes scanned downward quickly, and after a while, Serena's eyes froze, staring straight at the two figures not far below. Although those two people looked no different from ordinary people, Serena knew that the other party's true identity was far from being as simple as it appeared on the surface. There is no doubt that these two people are undoubtedly werewolves. After discovering the other party's trace, Serena immediately began to inform other people to gather here and keep an eye on the other party's movements. Seeing Serena's movements, Chen Luo followed her line of sight, looked down, looked at the two human figures, and asked curiously in his eyes, "Serena, how did you find out that they are werewolves? I don't think they are any different from normal people." Hearing this, Serena turned her head and glanced at him indifferently. "We have their photos in our system." Chen Luo. He also didn't expect that the other party's method of confirming the target was not as grand as he imagined, but rather unpretentious. Sure enough, clever hunters often use the simplest search method. Although I don't remember which great man said this sentence at the beginning, but at this moment, Chen Luo has a kind of recognition for this sentence that he has never had before. After saying this, Serena ignored Chen Luo's reaction and fixed her gaze on the two figures below. When she saw them disappearing in the subway station next to her, she immediately moved. Stepping forward, and then leaping lightly, the body drew an arc in the air and fell to the ground silently. Immediately afterwards, Serena followed the two figures and walked towards the subway station in an instant. Seeing this, Chen Luo shook his head helplessly, moved his feet, and with a gust of wind blowing in place, he fell to the ground silently the next moment. Following Serena's figure, Chen Luo came to the bottom of the subway station. As soon as he arrived at the platform, he saw Serena hiding behind the wall. At this moment, at some point, she had already drawn out a weapon in her hand, as if she was ready to fire at any time. Seeing Chen Luo approaching, Serena signaled him with her eyes not to act rashly, but Chen Luo nodded indifferently, not intending to do anything at all, but looked forward curiously. However, his eyes were not focused on the two figures that were probably werewolves at the moment. On the contrary, what he was looking at the moment was a tall, handsome human youth with a golden shawl and long hair. Michael Cole then. Although he is only a human being now, Chen Luo knows that he has the blood of the first generation of undead, Alexander Corvinus, and this blood can allow him to bear the pressure from vampires and werewolves at the same time. Transform at the same time, thus metamorphosis into a brand new creature, Wei Lang. In addition to having a higher physical fitness than ordinary vampires and werewolves, this kind of creature also has no weaknesses of both sides. Silver items and sunlight are things that can kill both of them, but for ghost wolves, has no effect. Such an existence, in a sense, can be regarded as the same as Chen Luo and Blade, belonging to the category of Daywalker. Although in Chen Luo's current strength, the ghost wolf strength is nothing more than that in his eyes, but such a creature with great potential, if given the opportunity, he does not intend to take the other party under his command. After all, after successfully metamorphosis into a ghost wolf, his combat power is already quite good. If his blood transformation is added, and he becomes the Source Blood clan, I am afraid that his strength will usher in a new increase. By then, will undoubtedly add a general under his command. While Chen Luo was still thinking on the other side, the two people who were walking forward behind Michael also seemed to have discovered something, and looked back quickly. When they saw the conspicuous attire of the Death Walker, their expressions changed instantly, and they roared, "Damn, there are vampires." After finishing speaking, the two immediately took out two submachine guns from under their baggy clothes, and shot them forward. Da-da-da. Fierce gunshots rang out on the platform in an instant, and as countless bullets poured out, the walls and even the ground were blasted out of deep pits, and even the crowd who couldn't dodge were hit by the bullets, subconsciously let out a scream, then immediately fell to the ground, crying helplessly. At the moment when the gunfire rang out, the originally dense crowd on the platform screamed and fled towards the surroundings, but within a short while, they all disappeared. And after seeing that the other party had discovered it, the Deathwalkers who had been hiding did not show any weakness, and fired back one after another. Because of the superiority in numbers, in just a short moment, the dense firepower of the vampire side covered the two of them one after another. They couldn't dodge for a while. Although the two were far superior to ordinary werewolves, they were still hit by several bullets. Because the bullets were silver-plated, they would do a lot of damage to the werewolves. Therefore, after they both groaned in pain, they immediately evacuated inside without even thinking about it. With a movement of their feet, their bodies jumped violently, and after quickly crossing the subway aisle, the two ran towards the opposite side of the platform. Chase! When 417 saw this, Serena led the crowd and immediately set off to chase after him without even thinking about it. Seeing the figures leaving, Chen Luo turned his head again, looked at the back of the figure not far away, who was fleeing in a panic, thought for a while, and finally gave up the plan to catch up, and turned to Serena go in the direction of disappearance. The other side. After a hot chase, Serena suddenly found that the opponents suddenly dispersed and ran towards two different directions. Seeing this, Serena didn't even think about it, and immediately divided her troops to chase. Perhaps out of self-confidence in her own strength, among the nearly 10 Deathwalkers who acted with her, she sent most of them to chase the other side, and as for herself, she faithfully led 2 Deathwalkers to chase to the other side. Not long after, Serena and her party finally stopped in a hidden corner. When she came to the end of the corner and looked at the blocked road ahead, Serena frowned. After patrolling around for a week, Her eyes suddenly lit up when she saw the manhole cover not far from the ground. A few people came to the side of the manhole cover and sniffed the surrounding air. A Daywalker next to him suddenly showed a gleam of joy on his face. "I smell it. There's blood in here." Chapter 108. Serena is in distress. Chen Luo takes action. After sensing the other party's movements, Serena did not hesitate and immediately planned to enter the sewer to hunt down. However, just after one of the Daywalkers jumped down, less than 2 seconds later, Serena's face changed suddenly, and she had a bad feeling in her heart, accompanied by a mournful howl and the wolf howl that followed. Sure enough, when she also entered the sewer, not far from where she was, a dead body that looked very familiar lay there. 2 huge amounts of gaps were torn in the throat, and a large amount of blood continued to flow from the neck. Not long after, the lower body was already soaked in blood. Seeing her companion die tragically in front of her eyes, Selena's eyes flashed with anger. She searched around, followed the bloody smell left in the air, and chased forward with another dead slaughterer. Guided by the smell of blood, the two advanced at full speed along the way, and after a while, they saw a fleeing figure ahead. Sensing the movement coming from behind, Sito turned his head subconsciously. When he saw the 2 figures coming behind him, blood flashed in his eyes, and a sneer flashed across his face. He didn't stop walking, but ran forward at a faster speed. "Go." Seeing the other party's actions, Serena and the 2 also did not doubt him, and followed closely behind, refusing to give up at all. The 3 of them chased each other, and after chasing for nearly 10 minutes, finally, in this densely packed and intricate underground passage, when the 2 of them passed an intersection, a sudden change occurred. Boom! A violent spark flashed, and then, a bullet wrapped in a purple halo shot out, instantly hitting the chest of the companion behind Serena. A trace of surprise flashed subconsciously in his eyes, before he understood what happened. Suddenly, along with a flash of purple light in his chest, as if some violent reaction had occurred, the flame instantly rose up, completely enveloping him in the blink of an eye. Without making a single sound, along with the rising flames, Serena's last companion died. Seeing this scene, Serena's heart was chilled, and without thinking about it, she subconsciously rolled over and quickly retreated to the side. And when she made this action, dense bullets burst out suddenly, hitting Serena's original position, and as the shell casing wrapped on the outside shattered, the purple light contained inside instantly radiated, spread around. Because the distance is too short, even Serena reacted quickly and quickly reached out to block it, but facing this pervasive light attack, the weakness of being a vampire who is afraid of the sun is undoubtedly exposed. Dazzling purple light shone on her arm, and the next moment, an unprecedented pain came from her arm. The arm seemed to be burned by flames. The originally white and jade-like arm was instantly surrounded by a ferocious and terrifying scorching mark. White smoke came out from the arm, and the flesh and blood seemed to be evaporated, and it continued to melt. Fortunately, this kind of light was only fleeting. In the next second, as the purple light faded, Serena's wounds finally stopped deteriorating. After escaping from the dead, before she could breathe a sigh of relief, the sound of heavy footsteps sounded not far from her. Hearing this sound, Serena's heart sank, as if she had realized something. Feeling no pain, he quickly turned around and ran back. Sure enough, within seconds of her leaving, at the corner, more than a dozen burly men came out one after another. Headed by Sito, who was chased by Serena, they all held guns full of ultraviolet bullets in their hands, and an icy glint flashed in their eyes, roaring and chasing after Serena in the direction she left. In an instant, the offensive and defensive momentum changed. Due to the impact of the ultraviolet rays just now, at this moment, both Celine's arms and legs were burned by the ultraviolet rays, and the black leather jacket she was wearing was also wiped by scattered shrapnel. A large area was damaged, revealing the infinite scenery faintly. But at this moment, Serena didn't have time to pay attention to these things at all. Because of her own injuries, her speed has also been greatly reduced at this moment. If this continues, she will probably be caught up by the werewolves who came behind her in a few minutes. Realizing this, although Selena endured the pain and tried hard to speed up, it was a pity that the injuries she suffered at this moment could not be compensated by willpower. The speed began to gradually slow down, and the body became weaker and weaker. Hearing the sound of footsteps getting closer to her behind her, no matter how firm Serena's will was, facing such a desperate situation, she couldn't help feeling a deep sense of despair in her heart. I saw her. At this moment, behind Serena, Sito and the others finally caught up. Looking at the figure who was less than 10 meters away from them, a cruel smile appeared on everyone's faces. Don't let her run away. Take her back to me. Just in time, the leader also needs some vampires for experiments. Standing where he was, he said calmly. Clear. When everyone behind heard this, they nodded one after another, then put away the guns in their hands, walked slowly, and walked in the direction where Serena was. But after hearing Sito's words, Serena felt very anxious, resisting the severe pain in her arm, and put out her gun to fight back. However, at this moment, most of her arms have been burned by ultraviolet rays, especially the palms. Because there is no clothes to wrap them, the injuries suffered are more serious than other parts. It is very difficult to even lift a finger, let alone raise a gun and shoot. But at this critical juncture, the next moment, the mutation happened again. Bang, bang, bang. Just behind Sito and the others, suddenly, a violent gunshot rang out, and bursts of flames burst out from the muzzle of the gun, Zhao's. And a round of silver bullets shot out from the muzzle, and everyone had no time to react, so they rushed to the gun on the spot. A bullet pierced through his body. Damn, who the hell? Feeling the sharp pain coming from his chest, Sito's forehead was bulging with veins, his eyes were wide open. His face was full of murderous intent. He turned around and looked back, wishing to tear the opponent into pieces. I don't know whether it was intentional or unintentional. Although the bullets hit their bodies one after another just now, none of them hit vital parts. Therefore, apart from feeling severe pain, none of these people's lives are in danger. Don't look for it, I did it. And when everyone's eyes were green and they were searching for the despicable villain with the black gun behind him, the next moment, 10 voices that Serena was extremely familiar with sounded. Then, in a corner not far from the group of people, Chen Luo walked out slowly with a smile on his face. Chapter 109. The werewolf appears. Dangerous situation. It's you? More than a dozen pairs of vicious eyes fixed on Chen Luo, their eyes full of violent killing intent. I'm really sorry. I just saw that you seemed to be bullying a beautiful lady, so I couldn't stand it anymore, so I couldn't help but fired a few shots. After Chen Luo picked up the gun in his hand and signaled to everyone for a moment, then under the dull gaze of everyone including Serena, he casually threw the gun aside and watched them explain seriously. But I'm a peace lover. What I did just now was just to let everyone not hurt her. If there is anything wrong, we can sit down and talk about it. Isn't that good? Hearing this, the werewolves widened their eyes instantly and looked at Chen Luo in disbelief for a while. And then, there was a burst of laughter. Haha, I thought who it was. It turned out that this is an idiot. Peace lovers? Damn vampire, are you stupid for sleeping every day? How can you say such a thing? Don't you know that we are old enemies? Stop talking nonsense with this kid. Kill him quickly. I can't help but want to see if I rip his throat later. Will he still say nonsense like peace? Everyone was discussing unscrupulously in front of Chen Luo. Their eyes were full of murderous intent that could not be concealed. A playful smile appeared on their faces, and they sized Chen Luo back and forth unkindly, as if they had already decided on him. The idiot. Not far away, seeing Chen Luo's actions just now, and the series of speeches that left her dumbstruck, Serena's heart was ashamed, and her heart was once again shrouded in despair. The glimmer of hope that emerged when Chen Luo appeared just now was buried again, and she couldn't believe it now. How did this guy save Craven from the butcher? Could it be that he really relied on the love of peace? Nonsense. Although she no longer has any hope for Chen Luo, she also doesn't want to watch Chen Luo be buried with her. Therefore, just after Chen Luo delayed for a while, and her arm injury had just improved, Serena decisively took out her pistol, aimed at the group of werewolves who were turning their backs on her at this moment, and decisively pulled the trigger. Chris, go. With the sound of gunfire and Serena's voice, the next moment, as the bullet pierced through the head of a werewolf in front of him, hitting the bullseye and killing him, the rest of the werewolves reacted and immediately began to evade. Chen Luo definitely heard what the other party said, with a smile on his face, but his movements didn't stop at all. Taking advantage of the gap of other people's avoidance, Chen Luo decisively ran towards Serena, and then followed her looking at him in surprise. He hugged him by the waist with both hands, and quickly ran to the distance. Damn it! Stop them quickly and never let them escape. Seeing Chen Luo's movements, Sito's face changed and he shouted loudly. The rest of the werewolves also reacted one after another, raised their guns subconsciously and started designing. Bang, bang, bang. With the sound of intensive gunfire, countless bullets poured out towards Chen Luo at high speed. As long as they can hit successfully, in the eyes of everyone, the two of them will never escape death. However, to everyone's surprise, Chen Luo's speed was faster than they expected. His legs seemed to be shaking like afterimages. He dodged their attacks in the blink of an eye and turned into a corner in front of him. Disappeared immediately. Damn it! Follow me. Seeing this scene, Sito and the other werewolves were so angry that veins popped out of their foreheads, and their eyes were full of undisguised killing intent. They had no reason to let go of the prey they got so easily, and they started to act immediately. Roar! There were bursts of violent roars, and immediately afterward, everyone began to take off their jackets. Sita, one after another, standing on the spot naked, their muscles tensed, their heads raised and screaming. Afterwards, the muscles of several people slowly began to swell, and the originally burly figures began to rise again. The thick black hair pierced the skin on the body surface, and slowly protruded outwards, and the limbs slowly moved towards the beast. Form metamorphosis. The nails at the end gradually become sharper, and there are streaks of cold light on the dark nails. Among them, the changes in the head are the most obvious. The mouth is gradually protruding, and the 4 sharp fangs are exposed in the air, which looks extremely ferocious. The ears also gradually change to the shape of a beast and begin to become slender. The pupils that originally belonged to humans also began to transform into animal pupils. There is a cold and cruel luster in it. After waiting for the change to end, what appeared in place at this moment was a werewolf standing upright with 2 legs. Each of them is more than 2 meters tall, with strong and well-developed muscles, pitch black hair, slender and sharp claws, and sharp fangs shining white light. Looks like a ruthless killing machine generally. And so it is. In a direct confrontation, under normal circumstances, a vampire would not be an opponent of a werewolf. Whether it is strength, speed, or even recovery ability, a werewolf is 1 level higher than a vampire. If you fight a werewolf with bare hands, you will often lose to the vampire. Most of the situation, however, in these hundreds of years of confrontation, the reason why the werewolves who have the advantage in body gradually lose the wind is also very simple: wisdom. I don't know if they were corroded by the werewolf virus. As a result, werewolves' intelligence has never been very high, and they are often dominated by beast instincts, which makes them often unintentionally step into the traps prepared for them by vampires. Middle. Relying on a more precise coordination and a huge advantage in weapons, this is the reason why the vampire side has overwhelmed the werewolf side for so many years. Fortunately, after hundreds of years of evolution, the werewolf side has gradually become smarter. Especially in recent years, a werewolf scientist was born among the werewolves. With the weapons and equipment invented by this scientist, the werewolf survival is so much better. After the weapon is no longer at a disadvantage, combined with the werewolf's natural warrior-like physique, the power of the werewolf clan gradually grows, and at the same time, the desire for revenge against the vampires becomes more and more urgent. Especially on the vampire side, when the Elder Awakening ceremony is approaching, the werewolves are also undercurrents. I don't know what they are planning, and they seem to be ready to strike at any time. After successfully transforming into a werewolf form, the dozen or so werewolves immediately followed the scent left by Chen Luo and rushed towards the direction they left at high speed. On the other side, after running forward for a while, Chen Luo also encountered a new problem. Chapter 110 worried Serena, Chen Luo's strength. It seems to be a dead end ahead. Entering a corner again, after running a few steps forward, Chen Luo suddenly stopped, looked up at the blocked road ahead, and shook his head helplessly. It seems that there is only one other way to choose. After all, Chen Luo immediately planned to turn around and go back the same way. That's too late. However, he had just moved a little bit. In his arms, Serena, who had been hugged by Chen Luo, seemed to hear something at this moment, and her face suddenly became extremely dignified. They're coming. As soon as the voice fell, the next moment, accompanied by several violent roars, several burly figures with a height of more than 2 meters appeared in the corner, blocking the 2 of them tightly. Staring fixedly at Chen Luo and the 2 of them, he did not hide the murderous intent in his eyes, and there was a hint of teasing in the cold animal pupils, standing there motionless, as if he was admiring the last moment of the 2 when they were dying. General despair. Just after the 2 men shot and attacked them one after another, at this moment, Sito is no longer what he was before, wanting to bring it back to the base for experimentation, and now he only has one thought in his heart, which is to use his sharp claws to tear the throats of the 2 were torn, and only with the blood of the 2, the group could calm down the killing intent in their hearts. Roar. After transforming into werewolves, they have lost the ability to speak at this moment, but through their actions, even Chen Luo, who met werewolves for the first time, can clearly feel the deep killing breath from them. Seeing the werewolves walking towards him step by step, Chen Luo stood there, motionless, as if waiting for their arrival. While waiting, his eyes kept looking and scanning the front. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, and he exclaimed, "So this is a werewolf? This is the first time I've seen it." Different from Chen Luo's relaxed expression, at this moment in his arms, Serena looked forward with a serious expression, her eyes full of unyielding expression. "Put me down." Huh. Hearing this, Chen Luo lowered his head, saw her face at the moment, seemed to think of something, and said slowly, "Don't force yourself. With your current body, I'm afraid you won't be able to fight anymore." "Then we can't wait to die here." Serena began to struggle hard, wanting to fight side by side with Chen Luo. At this moment, Serena didn't notice at all. Before Chen Luo passed by, Chen Luo didn't give up on her, and when he chose to take her to escape together, her attitude towards Chen Luo also changed huge amounts of. Comparing, they are like 2 different people. Because a considerable part of the leather jacket on her body was damaged, this also caused her snow-white skin to have intimate contact with Chen Luo's palm several times when she was struggling, and Chen Luo couldn't help but feel the delicate feeling coming from the palm of her hand. Swing. When she came back to her senses, Chen Luo just exerted a little force, and she was unable to move. After all, she still had severe burns on her body at the moment. Although she has improved a little now, it is still difficult to move normally. The battle is still too rough. And even if her injuries were intact, she might still be powerless in the face of the dozen or so werewolves. So Chen Luo didn't intend to ask her to help him at all. He turned around and put them behind him, and then slowly got up. You'd better have a good rest. Next, leave it to me. As he said that, in order to prevent her from not listening to his dissuasion, Chen Luo also took away the firearm in her hand. Without a weapon, Serena is completely unable to display any combat strength at this moment. Looking at the back of Chen Luo turning and walking towards the group of werewolves, a trace of anxiety flashed in Serena's eyes, and she subconsciously said with some concern, "But how can you alone be the opponent of so many werewolves?" Her worries are not unreasonable. After all, she has never seen the scene of Chen Luo fighting before. Even if she heard Chen Luo say that he can draw with the legendary butcher before, it is completely regarded as his bragging looking at it. C District didn't realize that what Chen Luo said might be the truth. As for the strength of these werewolves, Serena, who has fought for hundreds of years, knows better than anyone else. Even though she, as a Daywalker, is much stronger than ordinary vampires, even if she faces 2 or 3 werewolves, she can still deal with them with confidence. But in the face of more than 10 werewolves, even she has no confidence in winning at all. It is precisely because she understands the horror of these werewolves that, while Serena is angry at Chen Luo's brazen behavior, she also unconsciously feels a little more worried. As for Serena's worry, Chen Luo also naturally felt it. He paused slightly with a smile on his face and slowly said, "Don't worry. It's just a few werewolves, and it won't do anything to me." What a threat. And don't you also wonder why I was able to bring Craven back from the butcher? Now, you will know the answer. Ask for flowers. After all, Chen Luo paused step by step and came to the group of werewolves in front with a twinkle of pity in his eyes and said, "What a pity. In fact, I don't really want to do anything to you. But who made you offend me? Now it seems that I can only say sorry to you." 17. In fact, when he set out to go here, Chen Luo had already decided in his heart that this time he must not kill as much as before. Now he has a shortage of manpower. If he kills them all, then what is the point of his coming here? Therefore, in order to alleviate the problem of insufficient manpower, Chen Luo has already made a plan when he came this time. Whether it is a vampire or a werewolf, he only needs to get rid of the disobedient high-level people. And I won't wave the butcher knife in my hand. But now this situation is obviously necessary. Killing intent slowly rose in his heart. Chen Luo took out the gloves from his arms and put them on leisurely. Seeing Chen Luo's actions as if no one was around, the group of werewolves finally couldn't hold back. They roared wildly and attacked in Chen Luo's direction. As they waved their sharp claws, cold lights flashed in the air, and the surrounding air seemed to change. It got chilly, exuding a cold killing intent. As the sharp claws gradually approached Chen Luo, the eyes of Sito and the others became even more blood-red. Under the control of beast's instinct, they couldn't wait to tear the throat of the prey in front of them, thinking that there would be a life in front of them. As things pass before their eyes, their hearts are filled with pleasure. However, it is not long before they are happy. The next moment, a silvery white flash lit up, like a small ring, passing by their necks one after another. Before they could react, suddenly, a sharp pain came from their necks. Immediately afterwards, imperceptible thin marks appeared from their necks, and strands of blood began to ooze out. Under Serena's shocked gaze not far away, more than a dozen heads fell off one after another, splashing all the water splashes. The body was weak and fell to the ground. With the passage of life, these werewolves on the ground at this moment gradually returned to their human form. They unconsciously twitched a few times, and then there was no more sound. In just an instant, in this battle of great disparity, the outcome is already decided. Chapter 111 Serena's Little Thoughts. Chen Luo's figure slowly reappeared, and he took a corpse that was about to fall, and the blood cup quietly appeared in his hand at some point. After connecting a cup full of fresh blood with a thought, the blood instantly began to transform, and within a short time, it had already transformed into a drop of crystal-clear blood, like amber, with an intoxicating luster. Looking at the drop of blood in the cup, Chen Luo nodded in satisfaction, then turned and walked towards Serena. Coming to her, looking at her beautiful face that was still dull at the moment, Chen Luo smiled and handed over the blood cup in his hand. "Drink it. It will make your injury recover faster." However, Serena couldn't hear what Chen Luo said at this moment. She just stared at him blankly, her face full of disbelief. Are you really that strong?" Until this time, what Chen Luo said to her back then could not help but come back to her mind again. Before that, she always regarded the other party as a big talk, but now it seems that Chen Luo really didn't lie to her. After realizing this, Serena was shocked, but she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed that she had wrongly blamed Chen Luo at the beginning. Therefore, facing Chen Luo's staring gaze, she subconsciously dodged and lowered her head slightly. There was a slight blush on his face. It's just because the two of them are in a dark environment now, and Chen Luo didn't notice Serena's abnormal state at the moment. You can't blame me. I told you this long ago, but you didn't believe me. Chen Luo shrugged helplessly and explained. Hearing this, Serena's face became more dizzy, and her head unconsciously lowered a little. She didn't say a word, and remained silent. Seeing the other party's reaction, Chen Luo seemed to have reacted at this time, and looked at the other party's reaction quite interestingly. All along, the other party had always looked like an iceberg beauty in front of him, but now he suddenly showed such a gesture, but it adds a bit of charm. Knowing the embarrassment in the other party's heart, Chen Luo smiled and said nothing more, but passed the blood cup in his hand further, and said softly, "Drink it. Your current situation requires a certain amount of blood supplementation." Seeing the blood cup in Chen Luo's hand, Serena hesitated for a moment, then reached out to take it. Lowering her head, when she saw the crystal-clear drop of blood in the cup, a hint of surprise appeared in her eyes again. So beautiful. This was the first time she encountered blood that could reach this purity. It looked like crystal amber, extremely clear. And besides the very beautiful color, when she looked closely, she could also faintly smell an intoxicating fragrance. Just by smelling a little smell, she felt that her physical condition was a little better. Feeling this, Serena's eyes lit up, and she couldn't wait to put the blood in the cup into her mouth. As the blood melted in her body, the next moment, Serena felt an unprecedented warm current gushing out of her body, quickly swimming to the wounds all over her body, accompanied by a comfortable and refreshing feeling. She couldn't help but feel comfortable closed his eyes. When the warm current gradually faded, Serena opened her eyes again, looked down at her hands, and saw that the palms that had been burned by the ultraviolet rays had already healed completely at this moment. Not only the palms, but even all the burnt parts of the whole body, all restored to their original state, without a trace of traces. Feeling the constant vitality in her body, Serena was surprised to find that not only the injuries on her body, but also her body, which had already been exhausted due to a large amount of blood loss, had returned to its peak state. And the reason why she was able to recover so quickly was only because of the drop of blood she just drank. Formidable strength, as well as the mysterious method just now. In Serena's heart at this moment, she has already developed a strong curiosity about Chen Luo, who has been together for less than a day. Thinking of this, Serena turned her head subconsciously and was about to ask something. But when she saw Chen Luo looking at her without blinking, following Chen Luo's gaze, Serena subconsciously looked down at her body. Because of the previous battle, a considerable part of the leather jacket on her body has been damaged at this moment. Originally, due to the influence of ultraviolet rays, most of the exposed skin was still in a burnt state, but now after returning to normal, the situation has changed again due to unforeseen circumstances. Same. A large piece of snow-white skin was exposed to the air, revealing the inner scenery faintly. Coupled with the broken leather clothes on his body, it added a bit of temptation, causing even Chen Luo, who had been with Tony Rhodes and the others before, "Now I can't keep my eyes open for a while, and I can't hold back." After realizing this, Serena's face turned cold, and she immediately stretched out her hands to cover her body, staring at Chen Luo with eyes that were about to breathe fire, and said coldly, "Have you seen enough?" Hearing this, Chen Luo immediately came back to his senses, laughed a few times awkwardly, and then began to explain seriously, "Actually, I just suddenly remembered something else, so I was a little distracted." After saying this, Chen Luo looked at Serena seriously. "I really didn't mean it just now. You must believe me." Hee. Serena would not believe his nonsense, she sneered, and then said, "A certain person seemed to say that he is a peace lover just now, but I don't think your method has anything to do with peace, right? Bye. You wait for me here. I'll find you a dress." After leaving this sentence, Chen Luo hurriedly turned and walked away. After seeing Chen Luo disappear, Serena finally couldn't hold back anymore. The indifference she had worked so hard to maintain disappeared in an instant, and her face was once again covered with blush. Thinking of Chen Luo's gaze just now, Serena felt ashamed and felt an inexplicable feeling at the same time. Emotions also quietly began to spread in her heart. 0.1 And this feeling is something she has never experienced in her hundreds of years of vampire career. Before she savored it carefully, Chen Luo came back again not long after. Leaving the sewer in a hurry, he went to a nearby clothing store, and after buying a lady's windbreaker, Chen Luofu rushed towards Serena again without stopping. "The clothes are back. Change them quickly." Passing over the windbreaker in his hand, Chen Luo turned around and left the corner, waiting outside. Seeing the other party's movements, and looking at the windbreaker in her hand that she didn't even have time to tear off the label, Serena was silent for a moment, and then silently changed into her clothes. A moment later, when Serena walked out of the corner again, She had returned to her original capable appearance at this moment, turned her head to look at Chen Luo, and said slowly, "What's the next plan?" Chapter 112 Erika's Intentions, Found Clues. Hearing this, Chen Luo thought for a while, then looked at the other party and said, "I would like to explore here for a while. Since there are so many werewolves hidden here, maybe I will find something." Chen Luo's words came from his heart. After all, he has not forgotten his purpose of coming here. Apart from seeing the werewolf, a novel species, the rest is to find the leader of the werewolf clan, the whereabouts of Lucien. As long as he can be found, then he has the hope of conquering the werewolf group. Therefore, if this trip can successfully find the werewolf's lair, it will undoubtedly be very beneficial to him. Hearing this, a trace of approval flashed in Serena's eyes. She nodded slowly and said, "Then let's check it out first." In this regard, Chen Luo has nothing to do. So in this dark and damp sewer pipe, the two started searching again. However, this time their luck is not as good as before, because the underground pipelines here are too developed. The pipeline network is distributed under the entire city, and there are countless forks in the road. If they want to succeed in such a huge underground pipeline, finding the trace of the werewolf is even more difficult. So, after searching for several hours in the end, the two still had nothing to gain. In desperation, the two had no choice but to give up their search and turned around to return to the original road. And when the two returned to the designated place, at this moment, a group of death walkers who were originally assigned by Serena to hunt down another werewolf were already waiting in place. Contrary to her situation, facing the pursuit of nearly 10 death walkers, the other werewolf was not at all interested in fighting. After jumping into the sewer, he even made use of his familiarity with the terrain here to turn around quickly and dive into the sewer. After entering a corner, it disappeared in front of everyone. After losing the tracking target, everyone had no choice but to return to their original places and wait. Seeing that the other team didn't gain anything, Serena had no other choice, and finally had no choice but to return to the base camp. After returning to the base camp, everyone got out of the car and walked towards the interior of the castle. As soon as she stepped into the gate of the ancient castle, Erika, who had been waiting for a long time, saw Chen Luo and others coming back from the window, and immediately went downstairs to greet her. Coming to Chen Luo's side, Erika had an unconcealable happy smile on her face, and her tone became a little cheerful unconsciously. "Chris, you're finally back. You haven't come back for so long. I thought you might be in some danger. So I wanted to ask Craven to send someone out to find you, but he refused. I don't think he saved your life at all. Benefactor, take it to heart. But it's okay. I knew that Guy Craven was unreliable, so I asked Eva to help you divination, and then Eva told me that you will be fine today. Now it seems that it is still Eva. Baby is amazing. Much better than my useless brother." Looking at Erika, who was surrounded by him and talking constantly, Chen Luo could naturally feel the other party's undisguised concern. His heart warmed up slightly, and there was a trace of apology on his face. Looking directly into her eyes, Chen Luo lowered his head and said softly, "Sorry, Erika, for worrying you." Under Chen Luo's scorching gaze, Erika's heart instantly became extremely flustered. Her voice froze instantly. She was a little at a loss and stammered in a small voice, "It's okay. You're fine." Looking at her slightly flushed round face and her bewildered and cute appearance, I couldn't help liking this little girl who was a bit talkative and at the same time a little naive. Beside Chen Luo, looking at Erika, who was chatting happily with Chen Luo at the moment, Serena couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable and subconsciously frowned slightly. "Chris, we haven't finished our work today. I just thought that the gang of werewolves might have other purposes for this operation. Come with me, let's investigate the monitoring together." After leaving these words, Serena immediately turned and walked upstairs. Hearing this, Chen Luo didn't think too much about it, thinking that the other party had some serious business looking for him. So he looked at Erika apologetically and said softly, "I'm sorry, it seems I'll be leaving for a while." After waving his hand and saying goodbye to Erika, Chen Luo immediately turned around and walked upstairs. Seeing the back of Chen Luo leaving, Erika stood in the same place, stunned for a moment, didn't know what to think. Her face flushed slightly, but soon turned into a somewhat angry look, bit her lip subconsciously, and muttered something in a low voice. "What's the matter, Erika? Didn't you just complain that Serena interrupted your good business?" Behind Erika, a teasing voice spread quickly. "Serena, that guy is too much. It's hard for me to be alone with Chris." Erika, who was told what was on her mind, subconsciously echoed a few words, then suddenly reacted and screamed, quickly turned back and turned around. When she saw Eva quietly appearing behind her at unknown time, her little face flushed instantly. Her heart was full of embarrassment that her mind had been shattered, and she stammered and began to defend herself. "No. Eva, listen to me. I don't." Seeing her appearance, the smile on Eva's face became more and more obvious. She reached out and touched her small head, and comforted 840 with a smile. "Okay, don't explain. I understand. I think Chris he should understand too." Believe me, it's not just Erica. Chris also has a crush on Erica. Anyway, Erica's wish will definitely come true in the future. After all, this is all the result of my occupation. Really? Sure enough, after hearing Eva's words, Erica had a visible smile on her face. She didn't know what she thought of. Her beautiful big eyes were in a daze, as if she had fallen into a looks like a fantasy. Seeing her expression, Eva on the side shook her head helplessly, her eyes becoming more doting. Silly boy, this kind of thing actually doesn't need divination at all, and it already has a result. On the other side, after waiting in the monitoring room for a while, when she saw Chen Luo coming here, the corner of Serena's mouth raised a slight arc, but it disappeared in an instant. His eyes moved to the screen in front of him, and his brain began to run rapidly, thinking about all the details of the previous tracking of the werewolf. Seeing the pictures on the screen in front of her constantly changing, after a while, Serena's eyes suddenly brightened, and she suddenly made a discovery. I found it. Chapter 113 Alone with Selena. Come one step later. Have you found anything? Hearing Serena's voice, Chen Luo quickly walked to her side, leaned over to watch the screen. Even though the two are close at hand now, Serena didn't have the slightest intention of dodging. She pointed at the blurred figure on the screen. Her eyes looked a little excited and said, "That's it. I just checked the surveillance for a while, and found that the two werewolves have been following this human being for a while. It must be this human being who bid for them." Speaking of this, looking at the somewhat blurred figure on the screen, Serena's expression was a little urgent. However, the figure found on the surveillance is still a bit blurry. It will take a long time to clearly restore his original appearance. It seems that we will have to wait a few hours to know the result. Chen Luo didn't speak, but looked at the figure on the screen, with a smile on the corner of his mouth, and spoke slowly. The man's words, "I think I know who he is." Turning his head, facing Serena's eyes full of surprise, Chen Luo smiled and said, "Do you still remember when you were on the subway station? I seem to have seen him there. I think those two werewolves should have entered with him." The subway station? Who is that person? Do you know his name? Hearing Chen Luo's answer, Celine asked impatiently. I'm not sure about that. After all, I'm not used to strike up a conversation with strangers, especially if the other party is a man. Chen Luo shrugged, not intending to tell the truth at all. Although he also knows the name of the other party, it is not easy to explain this kind of thing. After all, it is his first time here, and has his name directly written on the other party's body? Exposing too much in this situation will only attract some unnecessary suspicions. After hearing Chen Luo's words, Serena couldn't help but rolled her eyes at him, said in a bad mood. Then what's the difference between you and you didn't say it? In the end, don't you have to wait for the computer to analyze the results? I have to say that even a simple eye-rolling action adds a touch of warmth to Serena's cold temperament, which makes her look special. Seeing her rare appearance, Chen Luo looked directly at her with burning eyes, and said unabashedly, "Isn't that just right? We also have a reason to stay here for a while." Hearing this, Serena's heart was shocked, and her eyes began to flicker instantly. She lowered her head slightly, not daring to look into Chen Luo's eyes anymore. She stared at the screen in front of her without blinking, concentrating on it, as if there is something that attracts her in general. It's just that although she tried her best to appear serious, in Chen Luo's eyes, her actions seemed a little pretentious. From Chen Luo's perspective, it can be clearly seen that at this moment Serena's beautiful face is already covered with a layer of blush. Her eyes are a little distracted. Her attention is not on the screen at all. Her body is tense. The whole person is in a state of tension visible to the naked eye. Seeing the other party's appearance, Chen Luo smiled inwardly, without breaking it, moved a chair and sat next to Serena, without any scruples, looked at her above board and did not hide his intentions at all. For Chen Luo's performance, Serena naturally noticed and felt ashamed, but more nervous. Even though she is a Daywalker who has experienced many battles, she doesn't know how to deal with the current situation. She simply pretended not to see it, without any sign of turning her head, and stared at the screen without blinking. It looks like she is working, but at this moment, her mind has drifted away and disappeared. Time passed minute by minute in her distraction. Soon, several hours passed, and at this moment, the search results had already been quietly displayed on the computer in front of the two of them, but Serena didn't notice it at all, and was still in a daze. In the past few hours, although the two of them have not even said a word, but at this time, not speaking can already express a person's intention to a certain extent. Regarding this point, Chen Luo, who was taught by two excellent teachers, nature is very clear. Tony, Rhodes. Seeing that the time was almost up, Chen Luo didn't intend to continue any longer. He stretched out his hand and shook her in front of her, finally waking her up. Wake up, Serena. The result has come out. Result? What result? Serena, who hadn't reacted yet, subconsciously replied. But just after she said the words, she came back to her senses and realized what she said. The face that had recovered its fairness instantly became dizzy again. Trying to calm herself down, Serena looked at the screen in front of her seriously, and when she saw the results displayed on it, she quickly got up, left a sentence of "we're leaving now," and walked quickly towards the door go. And during this process, her eyes did not fall on Chen Luo for even a second, and even the back view when she left seemed to be running away. Seeing the other party's performance, Chen Luo smiled even more. After a reply, he immediately got up and followed. This time the two did not take other people there. Firstly, Serena felt that this time it was just me, and she didn't need to spend so much trouble. Second, after seeing Chen Luo's strength before, even if she met Chen Luo on the road this time what accident, she believes that with her and Chen Luo's strength, it can be resolved. Then another few hours passed. According to the address found, finally, in front of a dilapidated building, a dark car slowly stopped. Chen Luo and Chen Luo got off the car respectively, raised their heads, and looked at the building in front of them. Serena took the lead and walked towards the destination first. After a while, when the two came to the room where Michael lived, they were about to open the door. However, at this moment, an indistinct bloody smell suddenly came from the room. Upon smelling this smell, the two frowned in unison, looked at each other, and felt a sense of displeasure in their heart's wonderful premonition. No more hesitation at the moment, and immediately broke into the door. But when the two entered the house, they found that the room was already in chaos. Zhao hao hao. After searching around, on the carpet in the living room, there was a bright red blood stains remained on it. Squatting down, touching the trace of blood with her fingers, after feeling it for a while, Serena showed a look of helplessness on her face and said, "Looks like they've been gone for a while. We're late this time. It seems that our trip was for nothing." Chen Luo didn't have any regrets about it. After seeing that there was nothing to gain, he turned his head to look at Serena and said softly, "In this case, let's go back. If we discover the movements of the werewolves later, it will not be too late for us to act." "That's the only way." Serena nodded slightly, without refuting, as the two set off to return, in the port area, somewhere among huge amounts of warehouse. At this moment, looking at the unconscious Michael in front of him, the leader of the werewolves, Lucian gradually showed a hint of excitement on his face. Chapter 114. Lucian's Ambition. While Chen Luo and Chen Luo were still waiting for the result, Michael's address had already been known by the werewolves. After getting the other party's address, Lucian even personally led the team to Michael's apartment and captured him. Although after returning home, Michael immediately realized something was wrong and wanted to turn around and flee, but what he had to face was a werewolf whose skill was far superior to his. As an ordinary human being, he had no room to resist and succeeded, taken away by Lucian and others. After bringing it to the base where the werewolf base camp was located, Lucian couldn't wait to start his experiment immediately. "Let's get started, Vaughn." Looking at Michael, who was bound and fixed all over and fell into a coma, Lucian turned his head and said to a man with gray hair and an old face. As the chief scientist of the werewolf family, Vaughn's status among werewolves was not respected by many people at the beginning. Because he was transformed into a werewolf due to an accident when he was old, this also made Vaughn not as bloodthirsty and warlike as other werewolves. On the contrary, he was able to curb his beast instinct very well, and use the werewolf race. The long life it brings is used to study science. It is precisely because of the continuous defeat of the werewolves against the vampires in these hundreds of years, which resulted in a large number of casualties. 327 made Lucian realize the importance of technology, so Vaughn came into the public eye at this time, be valued by Lucian. With the strong support of Lucian, Vaughn used his scientific research ability to start making weapons for the werewolves, and the ultraviolet bullets equipped by the werewolves came from people of grace. Over the years, in addition to developing bullets, Vaughn also consciously collects relevant information because he is curious about the history of vampires and werewolves. In the process of collecting information, he accidentally discovered an astonishing truth. That is, whether it is a vampire or a werewolf, they all come from a common ancestor, Alexander Corvinus. As the first non-dead man recorded in the data, Alexander naturally has his peculiarities. In fact, the reason why he was able to survive was entirely due to an accident. In a plague that spread widely, Alexander, who was infected with the plague, survived smoothly because of the presence of certain antibodies in his body. And the antibodies in his body produced new changes because of the combination with the plague virus, SEB. And it was precisely because of this change that he obtained the calendar area of immortality. The uniqueness of the blood in his body was successfully passed down after the birth of his offspring. As his 3 offspring grew up, in a later accident, 2 of his offspring were bitten by bats and wild wolves respectively, and after the blood in their bodies combined, 2 new species were formed. And this is the origin of vampires and werewolves. Unlike Marcus, who is a vampire, and William, who is a werewolf, as the 3rd son of Alexander, the other party has continued to this day as a pure human being. Although he did not have a long life like his father and 2 older brothers, the blood that belonged exclusively to the Corvinus family was still passed down among his descendants. And as a descendant of Corvinus, there is no doubt that Michael Bennett undoubtedly possesses this kind of blood. After learning about the specificity of the bloodline of the Corvinus family, Vaughn couldn't help thinking that if he could get this bloodline and mix it with the bloodlines of vampires and werewolves, would it be possible to create a brand new family? Species? Because there have been 2 successful cases of Marcus and William before, Vaughn seems very confident about his conjecture. And after learning of Vaughn's thoughts, since it is possible to improve his own strength, Lucian naturally has no reason to object, so he immediately ordered to start searching for descendants with the blood of Corvinus. After more than 10 years of searching and countless failures, he finally locked on the human being who is most likely to have this bloodline, Michael. After locking the target, Lucian immediately sent someone to track the target's movements, and then brought him in front of him. However, he never expected that the vampires just happened to notice his actions at this time, so they sent people to hunt them down. For this reason, they even paid the lives of more than a dozen werewolves on their side. Not to mention heavy. You must know that the werewolf clan now has less than 1,000 left because of their relationship with the vampires all the year round. With this base number, facing the vampire clans pressing step by step, the living environment of the werewolves is also shrinking step by step. And this was hundreds of years ago. After Lucian and Craven reached an agreement, the vampires believed that Lucian was dead, and they had a chance to breathe if they didn't kill them all. Otherwise, even with the help of Vaughn's weapon, facing dozens of times the number of vampires, no matter how strong the werewolves are, as long as the vampires are willing to pay a certain price, it is not a problem to wipe them all out. During this period, Lucian didn't think about increasing his population by biting humans. But firstly, because of the uninterrupted search of vampires, and secondly, because of the continuous advancement of science and technology in human society in recent years, both vampires and werewolves have entered the vision of high-level human beings. Therefore, it is already impossible to attack humans at will like that. Under such double pressure, Lucian is more and more eager to improve his strength. In his opinion, as long as he is strong enough, he will have the capital to contend with both humans and vampires, especially the vampire side. Even though hundreds of years have passed, he will never forget the despair and anger he felt when he watched his beloved die in front of him. In order to get the power to kill Victor's strength, he can give his all. As one of the 3 elders of the vampire clan, Victor's power is unquestionable. Even Lucian, who is the strongest among werewolves, would not be his opponent. The last hope of increasing strength. After more than 10 years of hard searching, finally, in Michael, he saw the dawn of success. Thinking of the awakening ceremony that the vampire side will start in 2 days, Lucian couldn't help but secretly began to look forward to it. It's almost here. Victor, wait for me. Right away. It's the day I will take revenge on you. Chapter 115. The eve of the awakening ceremony, the dance party. Just when Lucian was still experimenting with Michael's blood. On the other side, in the castle where the vampire base camp is located, at this moment, busy preparations are underway. Wait a minute. Don't spread the red carpet. Let's talk about these tables later. And the overhead lights. What idiot did that? We're having a dance, not a disco. Give me these lights and replace them. Tomorrow is the day to welcome Elder Marcus to wake up. Are you going to let the elders see such a scene as soon as he wakes up? Listen to me. The dance party tomorrow night must be held smoothly. In the corridor on the 2nd floor, Chen Luo leaned over and saw Erica orderly directing everyone to start decorating the castle. He couldn't help being a little surprised and said, I didn't expect Erica to have such an ability. This housekeeper is really good, surprisingly good. Chen Luo really didn't expect that this cute and talkative girl would have a good ability to be a housekeeper. Seeing her commanding and orderly appearance, Chen Luo felt a little overwhelmed for a while. She brought back to New York the idea of being a little butler of her own. Beside Chen Luo, Eva was wearing a bright red long dress, which set off her already perfect body curve even more amazingly. With a charming smile on her face, she looked at Chen Luo with a half-smile dash, slowly opened the mouth and said, If you want, you can consider taking him back to New York. It would be nice to be your little housekeeper. Chen Luo raised his eyebrows in surprise, turned his head to look at the other party, thought for a moment, and then asked with some doubts, Mind reading? Hearing this, a trace of astonishment appeared on Eva's face, but she quickly realized that the smile on her face was even wider, and she said, I don't have that kind of ability, but your thoughts are written all over your face, so it's not too difficult to guess. Is that so? Chen Luo nodded thoughtfully, looked at the other party calmly, and asked softly, So, I'm a little curious, how did Miss Eva know my identity? Presumably Miss Eva should have recognized me from the moment I stepped into this castle, right? Could it be that Miss Eva's divination skills are really so miraculous? Regarding this question, Chen Luo also wanted to have a good chat with the other party for a long time, but now that no one else was there, Chen Luo simply opened the skylight to speak frankly and asked questions directly. Facing Chen Luo's question, Eva shook her head slowly, and then said, Actually, I can already guess a thing or two about your identity without divination. Then, without waiting for Chen Luo to ask, she replied on her own. After all, as far as I know, that butcher is not a character who would kindly let Craven back, especially after Craven launched an attack on his family. Because of Craven's shot this time, I'm afraid that the butcher has turned his attention to this place. Referring to the incident that happened in the North Bear Country a while ago, I don't think it will be long before this place can't escape becoming a slaughterhouse. Destiny? Since the butcher is likely to come later, Mr. Chris, who came back with Craven, looks suspicious. Speaking of this, Eva drew a smile on her face, looked at Chen Luo, and teased. So when we first met, I tried to test it out, but seeing someone's reaction, I guessed right? Chen Luo. What a smart woman. Taking a deep look at the other party, after a while, Chen Luo sighed helplessly and said, "What a pity. Originally, I wanted to keep a low profile, but I didn't expect you to see through me so soon." Then, Chen Luo seemed to think of something suddenly, looked at the other party with some doubts and asked, "But since you already know my real identity, why didn't you tell me directly? Even if I say it, what's the use?" Facing Chen Luo's question, Eva asked back with a smile. Hearing this, Chen Luo suddenly fell silent. Just like what she said, even if you tell this matter, will it have any impact on him? Will he still fail because of giving up his plan? Or, after learning the truth, all the vampires here united to resist, and then they were all slaughtered by him like before? In fact, the fate of tens of thousands of vampires in Europe ended the moment Chen Luo came to this country. With his current power, no matter how many vampires unite together, they will not be his opponents. Rot. If he is allowed to kill, even if all these tens of thousands of vampires are standing in front of him, as long as he is given enough time, he can kill them all. But if he really intends to do so, he will not deliberately pretend to be himself when he comes here this time, and directly attacking the opponent's base camp by means of thunder is the most in line with his character. And the reason why he wants to achieve his goal through disguise is to win this place with the least cost. Therefore, Eva's approach is just in line with his wishes. Come to think of it, the other party might have chosen to keep his mouth shut precisely because of this consideration, because he kept the secret. I need enough manpower, so this time, it won't be like before. Looking directly at the other party, after a while, Chen Luo slowly opened his mouth and made his promise to the other party. But soon, Chen Luo changed the subject and continued, "But in return, you have to promise me one thing." Hearing this, the light in Eva's eyes flickered, and after thinking for a while, a smile appeared on her face again. "If you mean, let me manage it for you after you take this place, I have no problem." But, Eva looked straight at Chen Luo, winked at him, and asked with a smile, "You are so relieved to leave everything here to me? Don't you worry about me betraying you?" Seeing that the other party understood his thoughts in such a short period of time, Chen Luo couldn't help admiring the other party's intelligence again. At the same time, he couldn't help but pay more attention to this amazingly beautiful vampire witch. With a confident smile on his face, Chen Luo said unhurriedly, "Eva, you are a smart woman. I believe you will not let me down with your wisdom." She stared straight at Chen Luo for a while, and finally, Eva narrowed her eyes slightly, covered her mouth with a light smile and said, "Then I'll give it a try, but if I don't do well, you can't blame me." Master Chen Luo. Seeing her seductive and charming eyes, her voice was numb. Chen Luo's heart swayed, and he hurriedly turned his head away from looking at her, secretly feeling emotional in his heart. What a goblin. Chapter 116. Prepare. Serena at a loss. At 10 o'clock in the morning, there are still more than 10 hours before the dance party. The weather still looks a little gloomy, the sky is gray, covered by black clouds, and there is no sunlight. Wisps of light rain fell like silk threads, soaking the whole city in a layer of water mist, but pedestrians have long been accustomed to this, and hurriedly marched on the street, starting their busy day. Because there was no sunlight, even during the daytime, Serena was still walking freely on the street. As a member of the Deathwalkers, at the critical moment when the awakening ceremony is about to begin, they must always investigate possible hidden dangers in the city, especially the movements of the werewolf, the old enemy of the vampires, so as to ensure the smooth progress of the awakening ceremony as much as possible. Even as Victor's adopted daughter, Serena doesn't need to participate in the work at this time. She can wait for the dance to start in the castle, but she also resolutely refuses, just like an ordinary Deathwalker, started her work for the day. The inspection of the Camden area has been completed, and no abnormalities have been found for the time being. The Brent area has been inspected, and no abnormalities were found. The inspection of the Greenwich area has been completed, and there are no abnormalities. Several hours passed, and after inspecting the area she was in charge of, Serena also told her companions about the situation here. After some screening and found that everything was normal, everyone immediately prepared to leave and return. This is... When Serena was about to leave, suddenly, at the door of a clothing store, she stopped unconsciously. Looking at the suits of different shapes and styles placed in the store door, Serena didn't know what to think of, and stood motionless on the spot, a little dazed. A moment later, when she finally came back to her senses, she looked at the store in front of her, hesitated for a while outside, and finally blushed slightly, raised her somewhat stiff steps and slowly walked towards the store door. The moment she stepped into the store, the receptionist's eyes lit up instantly, and he recognized at a glance that the trench coat that Serena was wearing at the moment was the one that Chen Luo had given her. Although I didn't choose carefully due to the urgency of time, how could Chen Luo choose a cheap product as a gift? This windbreaker is also a world-renowned top-level luxury clothing. In the store that Chen Luo entered, it was also the most expensive, and the price was as high as $500,000. As an employee who has been obsessed with luxury clothing for more than 10 years, how could she not know the value of this windbreaker? So the moment Serena entered the door, she had already decided in her heart that this was definitely a major customer that could not be missed. With a bright smile on his face, he walked up to Serena with small steps and asked in a respectful tone, "Hello, beautiful lady, is there anything I can do for you?" Serena also came to this kind of place for the first time, and she was a little nervous, resisting the thought of turning her head and leaving, trying to pretend to be calm, and asked, "I want to buy a men's suit. Can you take me with you?" "Want to see it?" "Definitely can." Afterwards, the pair started to walk around the store with Serena, constantly introducing to her various details of the suits in the store. Under her deliberate guidance, what she showed Serena was the most expensive clothing in the store. Both the material and the style were of the highest standard. Needless to say, the workmanship was natural. Looking at the pieces in front of her clothes, Serena was a little dazzled for a while. She didn't know how to choose. Finally, after choosing for more than an hour, Serena made her choice. "Help me wrap this up." Looking at the suit in front of her, Serena's eyes flashed with satisfaction, and she said without looking back, Beautiful lady, I wonder if you can provide us with the figure of that gentleman? We can also choose a suitable size and pack it for you." Hearing this, Serena's expression froze for a moment. As Xiaobai, who came to the store to buy clothes for the first time, she didn't know the requirements for choosing a dress. She tried hard to recall the figure of Chen Luo in her mind. After a difficult communication with the other party for a while, the other party expressed his understanding. "It seems that the gentleman's figure is really good. I have rarely met a customer who can wear this size model," she said with some surprise on her face. "It's not bad," Serena replied somewhat unnaturally, her cheeks flushed slightly. During the packing process, she seemed to think of something suddenly, looked at Serena with a smile on her face and said, "Beautiful lady, if you're free next time, you can bring that gentleman to our store. If you can get more detailed data from that gentleman, we also have a custom-made suit service here, and the comfort level is even better than that in the store. Much better now on sale." "I know, I will come again if I have the chance." Afterwards, after paying the bill, Serena walked out the door with the packing bag in her hand. Standing on the street for a while, when she came back to her senses, she looked at the suit in her hand, as if thinking of something. A blush flashed across her face, and a hint of anticipation also appeared in her heart. In the luxurious bedroom prepared by Craven for Chen Luo was lying on the bed, flipping through the books in his hands boredly, because everyone was busy with things now. Even Erica, who always liked to be around him before, was incapable of duplication because of the heavy responsibility of the housekeeper. Therefore, Chen Luo, who had nothing to do, simply went back to the bedroom and read a book to pass the time. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and Chen Luo opened the door curiously. When he saw someone coming, his eyes lit up. "Serena, why are you here?" While talking, Chen Luo stepped aside, intending to let the other party enter the room. Unexpectedly, Serena didn't have this plan at all, and she had already consumed most of her courage just now when she made up her mind to knock on the door of Chen Luo's room. "This is for you." Pushing the package in her hand into Chen Luo's arms, she turned around in a hurry and walked towards the distance in a hurry, leaving Chen Luo standing there alone in a daze. "What's the situation?" Confused, Chen Luo returned to the bedroom, looked at the bag in his hand, and opened it curiously. This is..." Looking at the elegant suit in his hand, Chen Luo finally came to his senses. Realizing the purpose of the other parties coming to him, a slight arc was slowly drawn at the corner of his mouth, and Chen Luo was in a good mood for a while. As time passed, soon, with the ringing of the 9 o'clock bell, the dance held before the awakening ceremony also slowly kicked off. Chapter 67. A whim. Within the following month, Chen Luo, Tony, and Rhodes are singing every night in Los Angeles. Large and small file-size parties are held every day, and sometimes there are even 2 or 3 parties in a day. It can be described as crazy. Under the leadership of Tony and Rhodes, the 2 old fritters, Chen Luo can be regarded as letting go and having a great time. And even after playing for about a month, relying on his strong physique as a foundation, Chen Luo still looks like a dragon and a tiger, which is in stark contrast to the other 2. On the sofa in the living room, after playing wildly for a month, Tony and Rhodes were lying there weakly. They touched their hungry stomach after not eating for nearly a day. With 2 black eyes, Tony shouted loudly towards the kitchen. "Chun, is lunch ready?" I'm starving to death. Me too. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly felt something. Rhodes' expression changed, and he quickly got up and ran towards the bathroom. Then, there was a sound of 19 vomiting. After a while, Rhodes dragged his exhausted body, staggered out of the bathroom, collapsed on the sofa, and said weakly, I can't do it. I have held parties for a month, and now I feel that my whole body is flowing its all alcohol. If I drink any more, I'm afraid I'm going to be in the ICU. Me too. Tony stared blankly at the front, then seemed to remember something, turned his head to look in the direction of the kitchen. His face was full of envy. Damn it. What the hell did that animal Chen do? Arrived? It's been a month, and he's playing crazier than us. Why is he still acting like a normal person now? That guy is really full of energy. In my opinion, even if he plays for another month, it won't affect him at all. Rhodes was also envious of Chen Luo's physical fitness. If they saw Chen Luo's inhuman performance of 1-on-5 at the beginning, they still suspected that Chen Luo had such fighting power because of some knocks. But after nearly a month, if he took drugs, it would be impossible for him to behave like he is now. So in the end, they could only blame it on personal physical problems. For Chen Luo's inhuman physique, the two could only shaking his head helplessly. At this moment, suddenly, a burst of aroma came from the kitchen and floated in front of the two of them. Subconsciously taking a deep breath, both of them lifted their spirits, got up quickly, and turned their heads to look at the kitchen. Okay, it's done. Come and eat. Chen Luo's voice sounded, and immediately after, he came to the two of them with 2 golden fried rice plates and put them on the dining table. Gudong. Subconsciously swallowed, the eyes of the two of them were a little straight. It smells so good. It looks good. Looking at the food in front of them, the two of them, who were already hungry, didn't care about being reserved. They picked up the plate, scooped up a large spoonful, and then put it in their mouths. Tasty. After chewing a few mouthfuls, the two people's eyes began to shine, and they buried their heads and began to eat wildly. In less than 3 minutes, 2 full plates of fried rice were wiped out by the two of them. How comfortable. After filling their stomachs, the two sat down on the sofa with satisfied faces and let out a long breath. I really didn't see it. Chen, your cooking skills are really good. I really like this lunch. Thumbs up to Chen Luo, Rhodes said very satisfied. Chen, what kind of food is this? I feel like I've fallen in love with it. I think it's necessary to add this kind of food to my recipe in the future. It's nothing. It's just an ordinary plate of fried rice with eggs. You can find it in any Chinese restaurant in Los Angeles. Chen Luo made a brief mention, then sat down on the sofa, looked at the two with great interest and said, You should be full by now, right? How about it? When shall we start the next game? Hearing this, the two looked at each other subconsciously, and Chiemo shook his head in agreement. Chen, I think it's better to forget it. The party has been held for a month, and I'm already feeling a little tired. That's right. Party or something. It's getting a bit boring now. The two opened their mouths to evade insincerely, but their hearts were secretly bleeding. Just kidding. The party is so fun. How could they get bored? It's just that they know that their current bodies can't bear it to continue like this, and they don't want to watch Chen Luo eat alone. So they all agree not to mention it anymore, throwing a party at once. Is that so? That's really a pity. Chen Luo nodded. Seeing the faces of the two of them now, he knew it in his heart. I think we can play something else. At this moment, Tony suddenly suggested, What do you think? How about we go on an adventure? Adventure? Hearing this, Chen Luo and the two were stunned, and looked at Tony with puzzled expressions. That's right. As if thinking of something, Tony looked at the two excitedly, and said, Have you ever heard of the Bermuda Triangle? Maybe we can go there and check it out. Bermuda Triangle? Rhodes' face became a little dignified. I heard that there are often incidents of missing ships or planes, and the climate in that area is also very bad, and the magnetic field is very chaotic. If we go there, it could be dangerous. That's exciting, isn't it? Hearing this, Tony's eyes began to light up, looking even more eager to try. 803. Turning to look at Chen Luo, Tony asked, Chun, what do you think? Regarding this, Chen Luo shrugged slightly and said indifferently, I have no objection. Although it sounds like Bermuda is indeed a restricted area for humans, this is not the case for Chen Luo. With his current strength, even if he encounters an accident midway and falls into the sea, with his physique and self-healing power, even with swimming alone, he is sure to be able to swim out with the two of them, so he definitely won't feel worried. Seeing Chen Luo's reaction, Tony became more confident, turned his head to look at Rhodes, and said with a firm expression on his face, Don't worry, Rhodes. We'll take a look around the area first, and if it feels wrong, we'll retreat. There won't be any danger. In that case, there's nothing wrong with that. Rhodes thought for a moment, finally nodded slowly, and agreed. Seeing that both of them agreed, Tony did what he thought and started to contact his private jet without any hesitation. Not long after that, they took Chen Luo and the two of them straight to the airport. After getting on the plane, fly to your destination. Chapter 68 Bermuda, Air Crash. 10,000 meters high. A luxurious private jet is flying forward at a speed exceeding Mach 1, gradually approaching its destination. Inside the cabin. JRVIS. How long does it take to get to Bermuda? Tony sat on the seat, shaking the glass in his hand, and asked with a relaxed expression. There is still half an hour, sir. At this moment, a sound like mechanical synthesis sounded from the cabin. Hearing this answer, Tony nodded in satisfaction, and a trace of anticipation flashed in his eyes. I don't know what will be in Bermuda. I am really looking forward to this expedition. Maybe there may be any prehistoric relics. I really want to see the Tyrannosaurus Rex, Rhodes said with a smile. Maybe there will be an orangutan tens of meters tall. If we can find such a creature, then we will be famous. Chen Luo seemed to have thought of something, and a smile appeared on his face. Famous? Is there anyone in this world who doesn't know me now? Come on, I'm the famous Tony Stark. Tony rolled his eyes, but then changed the subject and said, but if the creature you're talking about it really exists, it is a good research material. The three of them were chatting in the cabin. Chen Luo glanced around. A flash of admiration flashed in his eyes, and said, but I really didn't expect that, Tony. You have already researched artificial intelligence. You have also realized the unmanned aircraft, which is really amazing. Although Tony is a playboy, his reputation as a super genius is not something that he has just blown away. Seriously, if this guy is given a while, he might even be able to research mechanical life. Speaking of this, Luo Da also nodded in agreement. As for the center of the discussion between the two, Tony sat on his seat with a face full of pride, and said without humility, that's definitely, I haven't seen anyone smarter than me in this world. Not always. Chen Luo said silently in his heart. Among other things, let's talk about the future MR. Fantastic, Reed Richards, who is known as the world's smartest at Columbia University in New York. There is also his old enemy, Dr. Doom, who is not as intelligent as Tony, and dumb. Although the two have not yet graduated, they have already begun to emerge. Thinking about it, in a few years, the wisdom shown by these two people is enough to make Qian Fan listen. In addition to these two, there are also a group of super geniuses such as Dr. Banner, the first Ant-Man Hank Pym, etc. Among them, except for Dr. Pym's early retirement, everyone else is still unknown. When these people officially rise up at that time, Tony may not have the confidence to say this again. While thinking about these things, Chen Luo suddenly seemed to remember something, looked at Tony with great interest and said, by the way, Tony, have you considered moving your corporate headquarters to New York? Huh? Why do you have such an idea? Tony froze for a moment and looked at Chen Luo in confusion. It's nothing. I just feel that New York should be very lively in the future. I think you will be interested because you like lively things. Chen Luo shrugged and said casually. Besides, New York is also my territory. If you come here, I can cover you too. What? You're covering me? Tony's eyes widened in disbelief. Don't be kidding, okay? I'm Tony Stark. I don't need help from others. Even if something happens, I can handle it myself. Forget about going to New York. I feel that Los Angeles is quite comfortable. At least the number of beauties here is much more than New York, which is not comparable to yours. Hearing this, Chen Luo smiled and said nothing more. What he said just now was an idea that popped up when he had an idea. It doesn't matter whether it is successful or not. Anyway, Tony will move to New York in the end. It's just a matter of time. Then, half an hour passed. While the three were chatting, suddenly, the voice of JRVIS sounded. Gentlemen, the Bermuda Triangle has arrived. Hearing this, the three of them instantly lifted their spirits and hurriedly looked out the window. The location of the three of them at this moment is on the edge of Bermuda, about 1,000 meters above sea level. Through the window, the three of them could clearly see. Not far from them, a stretch of dark clouds covered the sky, the clouds covered with lightning and thunder, and the sea surface was shrouded in a layer of thick fog, making it impossible to see the contents clearly. But even here, the three of them could faintly hear the howling wind from this area, as well as the lapping of the waves, coupled with the constant roar of thunder. It gave people a feeling of heart palpitations. Seeing the scene in front of them, the three of them were silent for a moment and looked at each other. After a long time, Rhodes hesitated and said, Tony, why don't you? I think this adventure is fine. I suddenly found that the party is more fun. Hearing this, Tony, who was already a bit retreating, was relieved. He frowned, pretended to be hesitation for a while, and then sighed heavily. Hey, I actually wanted to go in and take a look, but seeing how scared Rhodes is, let's forget it. Tony stepped forward, patted Rhodes on the shoulder, and said earnestly, Rod, you are too timid. Sometimes I really doubt how you became a major at this age. You need to practice more in the future. Look at me and Chen Luo, we are not afraid pass. Tony is right. Come on, Major Rhodes. You have to work harder, Manua Zhao. Chen Luo on the side also nodded in approval, with a look of approval. Roads. Hee. I suddenly changed my mind. Why don't we go in and have a look before we talk about it? However, when his words fell, Tony seemed not to hear, raised his head and said to the surroundings, JRVIS, reset the course and send us home. I see, sir. Immediately afterwards, when they were about to turn around and leave, they didn't notice at all that not far from the three of them, the originally pitch-black clouds were rapidly spreading, and in less than a minute, they completely enveloped the plane where the three of them were on inside. The next moment, thunder and lightning, wind and rain, accompanied by the whistling sound of the wind. The strong airflow instantly blew the plane to this side, shaking violently. The three were completely unprepared, their feet loosened, and they fell to the ground in an instant. Chapter 69. Mare Fake. What's going on? JRVIS, what happened? Tony yelled in panic. Sir, the plane is suddenly hit by a strong airflow and has deviated from its original track. What? So where are we now? You are now in the Bermuda Triangle. As soon as the words fell, suddenly, accompanied by a violent shaking, the dazzling red lights in the aircraft cabin began to flash continuously, and then, Chow Weixi's intermittent voice sounded. Sir, due to the influence of an unknown magnetic field, the functions of various equipment of the aircraft have been affected, and the communication equipment has failed, making it impossible to communicate with the outside world. Ding, ding, ding. The wings have been damaged due to the impact of the strong airflow, and the damage rate of the fuselage is 30%. The plane is about to crash. Please evacuate as soon as possible. Hearing this, the expressions of Chen Luo and the three of them changed instantly. Damn it. Are we inside the Bermuda Triangle now? Rhodes' originally dark face was faintly pale, and his eyes were full of unconcealable panic. I don't know where the airflow came from, and it just enveloped the plane. It seems that our expedition was not in vain. Chen, when is this 203? You still have the heart to say such things here. Tony clutched the seat beside him with both hands, tried to stabilize his body, and shouted at the two. There is no other way now. Let's parachute out first. Otherwise, if the plane explodes, we will have no hope of surviving. Then what are you waiting for? Where's the parachute? Before the plane explodes completely, we must escape quickly. At this critical juncture, Rhodes' qualities as a soldier finally made him calm down completely, and he began to think about ways to escape. As a member of the Air Force, he is absolutely familiar with parachutes, so if he finds the parachute as soon as possible, with his skills, he also has a certain degree of confidence that the three of them can land safely. Tony also understood that the situation was urgent, but before he could speak, the fuselage shook violently again as if it had been hit again. A moment later, when the fuselage stabilized again, the voice of JRVIS sounded again. Sir, due to the impact of the airflow just now, the fuselage was further damaged. Sorry, just now, all the parachutes stored in the plane have been lost. What? Hearing this, Tony Rhodes' faces turned pale, their eyes could not stop showing panic, and their hearts were full of despair. Damn it, then how do we get out? F***K. If I knew I shouldn't have come here to explore. Tony shouted angrily. If he could travel back in time, he would have to stop his idiot idea. But it is too late to say these things now. As the damage to the fuselage further intensifies, the plane is already falling uncontrollably towards the sea below. At the current speed, it is afraid that it will touch the sea within a minute at most. Falling into the sea from a height of several thousand meters, with his wisdom, he can already imagine what will happen to them at that time. Thinking of the scene where they were about to be smashed to pieces, Tony, who had always been cynical, finally felt the fear of death. Boom! Just when the two were panicking, suddenly, a loud noise came from their ears. Immediately afterwards, before the two of them could react, the cabin door not far away had disappeared. Without the obstruction of the cabin door, the violent airflow from the outside surged madly into the cabin, instantly sweeping Tony and the two into midair, and then along the way, flew out of the cabin door with the air current. Faced with such a scene, their brains completely went blank, and they had no time to think. They just subconsciously waved their hands and let out panicked cries, but they were quickly submerged in the storm. And the moment the two of them were about to be swept away from the cabin by the airflow, at the door of the cabin, Chen Luo stretched out his hand quickly, and then clamped the two of them in his arms, one on the left and the other on the right. Crunch! Under Chen Luo's terrifying power, his feet were firmly stuck in the steel pedals below him, leaving two deep footprints, as if looking for something. Jack. Finally, he seemed to have discovered something, and suddenly said, Tony, Rhodes, stop shouting. What do you see in front of you? Hearing Chen Luo's voice, the two raised their heads subconsciously. When they saw the foggy shadow in front of them, they seemed to have thought of something, and a glimmer of hope suddenly appeared in their eyes. That's an island? 7. However, before the two had time to be happy for a long time, they suddenly thought of their current situation. It is true that there is a small island in front of them, but they don't even have a parachute now, and the plane is about to crash, not to mention the chances of surviving when they jump out of the cabin before the plane crashes and fall into the sea. Even if they managed to survive, they were at least 10 miles away from the small island. Coupled with the turbulent seawater in this sea area, as well as the impact of the storm, the chances of them being able to reach the small island were infinite. Close to zero, in such a desperate situation, even a genius like Tony can't think of the slightest possibility of escape. Thinking of this, the hope that the two people had originally surged suddenly became dim again. Hold me tight, all of you later. I'm about to jump. At this moment, Chen Luo's voice sounded. Looking at the sea surface, which was less than a kilometer away from them at this moment, his face was calmer than ever. Waiting quietly for the plane to fall further, finally, when it reached a height of about 100 meters above the sea surface, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and he made a move immediately. I'm going to jump. The next moment, Chen Luo moved his foot and kicked back violently. Under the huge amounts of force, the bodies of the three people quickly began to move away from the fuselage, and then quickly fell toward the sea. Holding the two of them in front of his chest, Chen Luo leaned his back against the sea. Like a human-shaped cannonball, the distance of 100 meters passed in a flash. Just a few seconds, accompanied by a huge amount of explosion, it fell into the sea in an instant minister. With Chen Luo's body as a buffer, the two of Tony did not suffer much impact and successfully landed without parachute protection. Not long after, when Chen Luo led the two of them to the surface of the sea again, feeling the cold sea water around them, the faces of the two of them who were originally panicked were stunned, and it took a long time to react. We survived. Tony murmured something, suddenly seemed to remember something, turned his head suddenly, and looked at Chen Luo with a look of surprise. Chen, how did you do it? Jumping from such a high place, there is nothing wrong with it. Hearing this, Rhodes also reacted, recalling Chen Luo's inhuman performance just now, and he was also surprised in his heart. Didn't I tell you a long time ago? We are of different races, and this little distance has no effect on me at all. Looking at the two, Chen Luo twitched the corners of his mouth and grinned, two sharp fangs gleaming coldly, appearing in front of the two of them. Seeing this, Tony finally came to his senses. What Chen Luo said back then came to his mind, and his face gradually became horrified. He couldn't help shouting, Momf **K, you really are a vampire. Chapter 70. Living on a deserted island. Chen Luo, you bastard, you really didn't joke with us back then? Hearing Tony's shout, Rhodes also reacted, turned his head, and looked at Chen Luo in disbelief. Chen Luo rolled his eyes helplessly, looked at the two and said, Nonsense, if I were just an ordinary person, do you think I could jump from such a height and be safe? The fact was before the two of them. No matter how hard they dared to believe it, they could only accept the fact. It has to be said that a legendary creature like a vampire actually appeared in front of the two of them, and the impact on them was undoubtedly huge amounts of. But before the two of them could say anything more, the next moment, the turbulent waves in an instant, the giant was swallowed into the sea again. But within a few seconds, Chen Luo brought the two of them to the surface of the sea again. Looking at the endless pitch-black sea all around, violent storms and heavy rains were raging in this sea area. The waves were turbulent and tumbling, and the sea surface was filled with thick fog. At this moment, beneath the three of them, there seemed to be a huge, bottomless abyss, which could engulf them at any time. Looking straight ahead, looking at the black shadow looming in the thick fog ahead, Chen Luo knew that if the three of them wanted to survive now, the only way out was the small island in front of them. As long as they can successfully reach the small island, then Chen Luo believes that with Tony's wisdom, he will be able to figure out a way for them to leave this sea area successfully. With this in mind, Chen Luo immediately stopped hesitation, turned to look at the two of them and said, Tony, Rhodes, I'm going to swim to the small island in front of me later. Hold my leg, don't let go. You hear me? The two also knew that with their physical strength, coupled with the impact of the constantly churning waves, they would absolutely not be able to support them to swim to the small island ahead, so they had no objection and immediately nodded in agreement. However, when the two came behind Chen Luo and hugged Chen Luo's legs from left to right, Tony seemed to think of something suddenly, rolled his eyes, and said, By the way, Chen, I suddenly thought of a good idea. Look, if we sit on you, your legs will be free. Wouldn't it be faster to swim? Then we can get to the island faster. What do you think of the idea? Hearing this, Chen Luo's face darkened. He turned his head, looked at this guy with an unkind expression, and said slowly, I don't think so. Also, you bastard, if you dare to think this way about me again, then don't blame me for throwing you down. Seeing Chen Luo's dark face, Tony shrunk his neck subconsciously, smiled mischievously, and hugged Chen Luo's thigh tightly, not daring to make any more moves. Rhodes on the side smiled awkwardly and didn't dare to say a word. Hearing Tony's suggestion just now, he agreed with it at first, but seeing Chen Luo's reaction, well, he suddenly felt that this place is also quite good. Seeing that the two finally calmed down, Chen Luo stared straight ahead, took a deep breath, and finally started to move. With a sudden pounce, his hands began to swing rapidly like two spinning tops. Under the action of Chen Luo's huge force, the seawater was quickly pushed away, and under the huge amounts of force, Chen Luo led Tony and the two behind him, like a black arrow, quickly passing through the sea. Even if there are surging waves in front of him, it can't stop Chen Luo's pace at all. With his terrifying stamina dozens of times compared to ordinary people, he swam for nearly half an hour without any hesitation. Exhausted, after swimming for nearly 10 miles. Suddenly, not far in front of Chen Luo, a huge amount of steel plate was floating on the sea surface, gradually drifting towards Chen Luo's direction. Through the familiar pattern on it, Chen Luo suddenly understood that this steel plate probably fell from the plane carrying them. Looking at the steel plate, Chen Luo suddenly had an idea in his mind. He took the initiative to meet them, and when the two were about to touch, Chen Luo stretched out his hands and gave a strong support. Then, the steel plate stopped in front of Chen Luo instantly. After holding the steel plate firmly, Chen Luo turned to look at the two of them and said, "Tony Rhodes, you climb on this steel plate. I want to take this steel plate to the island together." "Huh? Why is that?" A trace of doubt flashed in Rhodes' eyes. But Tony reacted quickly. Without saying a word, he immediately strenuously moved forward, swam towards the steel plate, and then climbed up with difficulty. "Come on, Rhodes. We will need this steel plate in the future. After all, we have to find a way to get out. If there are not enough materials, even with my genius brain, there is no way to create a tool for leaving." Hearing this, Rhodes finally understood that without hesitation, he immediately climbed onto the steel plate, and then firmly stabilized his figure, controlling himself not to fall into the sea. Afterwards, Chen Luo dragged the huge amounts of steel plate and swam forward with both legs. Because both hands need to control the steel plate, compared to the previous speed, Chen Luo's speed at this moment is more than twice as slow. In addition to the weight originally carried by this huge steel plate, the burden on Chen Luo is also then it got a lot heavier. But fortunately, Chen Luo's strength and physique are far superior to ordinary people, so he can bear it. After swimming for nearly 2 hours, he finally arrived at the destination smoothly. The waves crashed against the rocks in front, making a crashing sound, and as the sea level continued to decrease, finally, Chen Luo gradually felt the solid touch from his feet. 0. Looking at the beach not far away, Tony and the two on the steel plate can't wait to jump down. Stepping on the beach, looking at the dense jungle in front of them, the bodies of the two who escaped from death softened and immediately lay on the ground, panting violently. Holding the steel plate above his head, Chen Luo slowly came to the ground, then put down the steel plate in his hand. His face became much more relaxed. He exhaled lightly and said, "Finally safe." Now that he is already on the ground, Chen Luo can fully display his strength. Compared with the unpredictable ocean, there is no doubt that the ground will be safer. Looking up at the dark night sky, Chen Luo also called out luck in his heart. If it was still daytime, his strength would be weakened by half. By then, would he be able to bring Tony and the others to this place smoothly? On the island, Chen Luo is not sure at all. It seems that the island is still at night, and it is too dangerous to enter the dense forest to explore at this time. "I think we should stay here for one night, and we can talk about the rest tomorrow." Regarding this, Tony and the two who had already been exhausted did not refute at all, and immediately agreed. Afterwards, Chen Luo went deep into the ocean again and caught some seafood. After the three of them simply filled their stomachs, they could no longer bear the exhaustion pouring out of their bodies and fell asleep. Definitely, in the face of this completely unfamiliar environment, Chen Luo did not dare to sleep to death completely and kept vigilant at all times. Fortunately, as the night passed, there was no danger here, and the three of them were able to pass through the doors smoothly this night. Chapter 121 Surrender, the next plan. Unlike the shock of other werewolves, Craven was not surprised when he saw Lucian, who was seriously injured and fell to the ground not far away. After all, he had seen the scene when Chen Luo was 1 against 10,000. After seeing Chen Luo's invincible strength, he had already made up his mind about today's challenge, even before it even started. Not to mention Lucian alone, even if all the werewolves present were combined, Chen Luo might not be able to hold on for a few minutes. If they really dared to resist, the place would already be bleeding like a river by now. But now it seems that everything is going as Craven expected. Facing Chen Luo, the legendary butcher, everyone has no intention of resisting at all. It seems that this werewolf clan will change hands starting today. Although he had expected it a long time ago, after actually seeing this scene, Craven couldn't restrain his heart and 593 surged. After the werewolves chose to join Chen Luo's command, in his opinion, within a few days, the European vampires would also be conquered by Chen Luo and become a member of the Chen Luo family. In this way, the original situation where the three major vampire forces in the world were at the top of their game undoubtedly no longer existed. After destroying the two vampire empires one after another, As long as all the vampire forces in America are unified, Chen Luo will undoubtedly become the real king of the vampire clan. At that time, the power in Chen Luo's hands will undoubtedly expand to an unprecedented level, even in the entire Dark World. He is already qualified to become one of the top underground forces, like Mutant Brotherhood, Hellfire Club, occupying a pivotal position status. Thinking that he would be able to see such a future in the near future as a member of the Chen Luo family, for a while, Craven was too excited to hold back. The other side. Chen Luo remained motionless, looking at Lucien who was lying on the ground in the distance, and said in a deep voice, "How is it? Do you want to continue fighting?" Hearing that, not far away Lucien, who had returned to human form at some point, lowered his head dejectedly, looking at the bloody hole in his abdomen that was blasted by Chen Luo's punch, feeling powerless in his heart. Although this kind of injury can't cause fatal damage to him who has become a ghost wolf, but after feeling Chen Luo's punch, he already knows the huge gap between the two. That is an absolutely insurmountable gap. The excitement after becoming a ghost wolf has already cooled down. After seeing Chen Luo's overwhelming strength, Lucien, who was at the moment, no longer had the thought of resistance in his heart. The only thing left in his heart was full of Chen Luo. With difficulty, he raised his head and turned to look around. When he saw the eyes of other people looking at Chen Luo at this moment, Lucien had already made a decision in his heart. No need, I lost. Feeling that his injury had improved, Lucien stood up with difficulty, and then came to Chen Luo step by step, knelt down on one knee, deeply lowered his originally high head, and a deep voice sounded. "From today onwards, you are the king of our werewolf clan. We will serve you for the rest of our lives." At the same time, all the werewolves around Chen Luo also knelt down on one knee, and a voice sounded, "King." Huge amounts of sound echoed through the vast warehouse. Including Cleven, everyone's eyes were focused on Chen Luo. Their eyes were full of awe, but their hearts were also full of excitement. After seeing Chen Luo's terrifying strength, everyone no longer had the slightest resistance to joining Chen Luo's command. On the contrary, in their hearts, they felt a sense of peace that they had never had before. For hundreds of years, although the werewolves have been fighting fiercely with the vampires, due to the huge disadvantages in numbers and equipment, they spend almost every day hiding in Tibet, mentally tense all the time, guarding against external dangers. Although in such an environment, they quickly became elite werewolf fighters one by one. Years of life and death fights have made them rapidly improve both in terms of survival experience and fighting skills, but such a non-stop fighting life, even a werewolf who is naturally warlike will have a tired day. No matter how tired they are, facing the pursuit of the vampires, they still have to brace themselves to deal with it. After all, this is a fight for their own survival, and they dare not slack off in the slightest. However, the life of hiding in Tibet all the year round, as well as the tension of life hanging by a thread at that moment, made the werewolves face huge amounts of pressure. However, such pressure disappeared without a trace after they chose to join Chen Luo's command. After witnessing the strength of this legendary butcher and the power in Chen Luo's hands, the werewolves couldn't help but be full of hope for their future life. Even if Craven chooses to join Chen Luo's command now, even if there is no movement on the European vampire side, with the help of Craven, it will be a matter of time before they choose to join. In this way, the werewolves no longer need to face the pursuit of the vampires, and their own safety is also guaranteed. Thinking of this, everyone was shrouded in a sense of security that they had never had before, and they were even more convinced by Chen Luo. After seeing the choices of the werewolves, Chen Luo was also in a good mood, with a satisfied smile on his face. After successfully achieving the goal of his trip, Chen Luo did not leave in a hurry and let the others disperse. At the moment, only Chen Luo, Craven, and Lucien were present at the scene. Looking at Lucien, Chen Luo's eyes narrowed slightly, and he spoke slowly. "Then according to my promise to you, when the awakening ceremony begins tomorrow, I will send Victor to your minister." Hearing this, Lucien, who was a little nervous about whether Chen Luo would really keep his promise, suddenly showed excitement on his face and looked at Chen Luo with gratitude. However, before he could say anything, he was interrupted by Chen Luo's next sentence. "But before that, you have to do one thing for me first." Regarding this, Lucien didn't have the slightest hesitation and immediately nodded in agreement. "Yes, Wang, I don't know what you need me to do for you in 4.6. Facing Lucien's question, Chen Luo didn't answer. Instead, he slowly turned his head and looked at Craven on the other side with a smile on his face. "Craven, I think it's time for you to tell Serena the truth about that incident." Hearing this, Craven was taken aback for a moment, and then immediately understood what Chen Luo was thinking. He didn't dare to be negligent, and nodded quickly. "I see. Chen Luo is a man of heaven." Afterwards, the three discussed the next step again before Chen Luo and Craven turned and left. Now that Victor's fate has been decided, it is necessary to make good use of his death. At the very least, I can't let that hate me. Sitting in the car, recalling that cold and beautiful face, Chen Luo sighed slightly. Chapter 122, Serena's Life Experience. Early the next morning, Chen Luo approached Serena early on, and then told her the news he had prepared earlier. What? That human has returned? The werewolves didn't do anything to him? After hearing the news from Chen Luo, Serena was also surprised. After the previous investigation, she found that the human named Michael was the target of the werewolf. In order to find out what the other party's purpose was, she and Chen Luo made a special trip, but found nothing. But she didn't expect that after only 2 days, the other party would be released by those werewolves. Such a situation could not help but attract her attention. After bowing her head and thinking for a while, Serena's face became a little dignified. Under normal circumstances, any human being who falls into the hands of werewolves will never have a chance of survival. But since Michael was able to return to his residence intact, in her opinion, there is only one possible explanation. That is, this human being has been assimilated into a werewolf. Hunting werewolves is also the responsibility of a Daywalker, and Serena was also a little curious about why the other party was targeted by werewolves. So after thinking for a short while, she suddenly made a decision. Chris, let's go over there and investigate again. Serena's words fell right into Chen Luo's arms, and he had no reason to refuse, and immediately nodded in agreement. Then the two set off immediately and drove towards their destination. On the way, looking at Serena's flawless side face, Chen Luo's heart moved. As if thinking of something, he asked curiously. By the way, Serena, I heard from Craven that you are the adopted daughter of Elder Victor, right? Can you tell me about it? How did you meet? Hearing this, Serena was silent for a moment. Her face became a little gloomy, and she slowly said, That's right. If Victor hadn't saved me and transformed me into a vampire, I wouldn't have survived until now. Hundreds of years ago, the village where I lived was attacked by werewolves, including my parents, who were slaughtered by werewolves. I was able to temporarily escape from werewolves because my father hid me in an underground secret room early. Hunt. However, just when the werewolves were about to find me, Victor found them in time. After killing all the werewolves who attacked our village, he found me. It was also from that day that I began to walk in this world as a vampire. Serena slowly told Chen Luo her story. Although her face looked calm, Chen Luo could still faintly feel the hatred for werewolves in her heart, and for Vic, who was her savior. So much gratitude for that. Sensing her emotions, Chen Luo sighed inwardly. For this girl who has been kept in the dark for hundreds of years, my heart is full of pity, and at the same time, for Victor, the culprit, my heart is full of killing intent. Regarding the incident Serena experienced, Craven was at the scene at the time, and he watched how Victor brutally slaughtered all men, women, and children in the village, leaving only Serena alive. As for why Serena's life was spared, the reason is also very simple, because from the moment he saw Serena, Victor remembered the daughter who was killed by him at that time. Because the two are somewhat similar in appearance, and because Serena knows nothing about the truth here because she was hidden by her father, Victor decided to spare her life and she adopted her as her adopted daughter. Since then, Serena has spent hundreds of years in Victor's lies. In order to repay her adoptive father and avenge her parents, she has been hunting down werewolves as a member of the Daywalkers and serving the vampires. Contribute your strength? And Serena's miserable life was all caused by Victor. Therefore, after learning the truth from Craven, Chen Luo made a decision at that time. Only by giving the other party the most cruel death can he calm down the killing intent in his heart. Soon, Serena, soon you will be able to revenge. Suppressing the imminent killing intent in his heart, looking at Serena at the side, Chen Luo thought silently in his heart. Afterwards, the two came to the downstairs where Michael was again and got off the car one after another. The two looked at each other and then walked upstairs at the same time. When the two came to the room where the target was again, they were about to open the door, but at this moment, there was a faint roar from the corridor outside the door. Hearing this voice, Chen Luo's eyes suddenly became serious. He turned to look at Serena and said softly, I'll go and have a look first. Be careful yourself. If there's anything wrong, just run towards me. Well, I see. Serena nodded slightly, looked at Chen Luo with some worry, and said, Be careful too. Don't worry, don't you know my strength? Chen Luo smiled, then immediately turned around and walked towards the end of the corridor. He strode forward, turned the corner, and came to the door at the end of the corridor. When he walked through that door, he was greeted by two burly men who had been waiting for a long time. King. Seeing Chen Luo approaching, the two of them looked serious and quickly lowered their heads and asked respectfully. Chen Luo waved his hand, didn't pay much attention to these things, looked straight at the two of them and asked, How is the arrangement with Lucien? King. The leader is ready. Hearing Chen Luo's question, the two quickly answered. That's good. Chen Luo nodded with a satisfied smile on his face. Just before Chen Luo and the two came here, Lucien arrived with a group of subordinates, deliberately revealing Michael's whereabouts, and then attracted Serena's attention, leading him here. After coming to 230, Chen Luo will create an opportunity for Serena and Lucian to meet. As long as she can recognize Lucian's true identity, then this step of the plan will be considered a success. As long as Serena realizes that Lucian is not dead, she will also realize Craven's problem. At that time, with her loyalty to Victor, her most likely choice is undoubtedly to wake Victor up in advance. Let Victor himself deal with Craven. After all, Craven is now the well-deserved leader of the European vampire side. Even if it is Serena who exposes what Craven has done, there may be a small number of people who believe her, so her choice can be expected. And at that time, it was Craven's turn to perform. As for why Chen Luo went to such lengths to let Serena discover the truth by herself instead of telling the other party directly, the reason is also very simple. That is, Serena's trust in Victor is still too deep. After all, he has been her adoptive father for hundreds of years, and it is conceivable how deep the relationship was during this period. Based on her trust in Victor, even if Chen Luo chose to tell her the truth, she might not believe it. On the contrary, it might even hurt the relationship between him and Serena. So even for the sake of insurance, Chen Luo would not take this risk. Compared to telling her by herself, it is better to let her find out by herself. It will be more credible. Chapter 73 Skeleton Monitor Lizard. Chen Luo save me. It is 100 meters away from this cave. In a huge, bottomless pit, accompanied by the sound of crawling. A moment later, a huge creature about 7 or 8 meters in length rushed out of the hole. This creature is like a monitor lizard that has been magnified hundreds of times. Its whole body is covered with gray-black skin. There are sharp claws on the ends of its limbs, and there is a faint layer of metallic luster on it. It can easily penetrate rocks, and it is because of the sharp claws under its feet that it can freely walk through the cliffs of the mountains, which is extremely flexible. The most notable thing is that the head of this creature is covered by a layer of white bone mask, which looks like a skeleton, which is daunting. This kind of creature is exactly the terrifying creature that is King Kong's old enemy, the skeleton monitor lizard. As the well-deserved overlord creature on this island, the skeleton monitor lizard not only has extremely strong flexibility and explosive power, but also has a super strong bite force. It can be said that as long as they become adults, there is no other creature except King Kong. Their opponents. And more importantly, the skeleton monitor lizard is also a social creature. They usually live deep underground. When they need to hunt, they go out in groups to hunt. It's okay if you meet 2 or 3, but if you meet 5, if the number is more than that, even an overlord like King Kong will have to stay away. Unfortunately, it was such a terrifying creature that had already quietly followed them without Tony and the two of them realizing it. Because of living underground all year round, the eyesight of the skeleton monitor lizards has been severely degraded, but correspondingly, they have also evolved another perception method, thermal energy perception. It is precisely because of this perception method that they are extremely sensitive to heat. Therefore, when Tony and the two lit a fire, they immediately attracted the attention of the skeleton monitor lizard. Although its body length has reached about 7 or 8 meters, but such a body is still young in this group, and it is far from the age to go out to hunt, but perhaps because it has no parents to take care of it, it has been underground for several days after not eating, it finally couldn't stand it anymore and crawled out of the ground on its own initiative. The cold and cruel eyes turned to the cave where the two were. The skeleton monitor slowly crawled forward, like a natural hunter, without causing the slightest movement, and gradually approached the entrance of the cave. As a shadow gradually came in, covering the light of the flame, the two finally became alert, turned their heads subconsciously, and looked out of the cave. However, just looking at it like this, the hairs of the two stood on end. Their scalps felt a little numb. They stood up subconsciously, and quickly moved towards the stone wall behind them. Shit! What the hell is this? Looking at the huge and hideous figure that poked its head into the cave and struggled to get in, the eyes of the two couldn't help but be filled with panic. Because of Chen Luo's protection during the day, the two of them haven't encountered any danger, but the situation is different now. Without Chen Luo's side, it's the first time for them to face this terrifying creature. Looking at the hideous skull mask that was less than 2 meters away from them, the two of them were once again shrouded in the shadow of death. At this critical juncture, the two no longer cared about hiding, and started calling for help loudly without even thinking about it. Help, Chen. Come back soon. Chen, if you don't come back, we will be eaten by this damn monster. Chen Luo, help me. Seeing the monster in front of them keep opening its mouth and roaring, the two couldn't help feeling cold all over their bodies and subconsciously wanted to escape. But at this moment the only exit was tightly blocked by this monster, and there was no escape at all. Space. Just when the two were extremely desperate, the next moment, the roar of the monster suddenly stopped, and then, under the shocked gaze of the two, the monster was quickly pulled out of the hole and disappeared in front of the two. Seeing this scene, the two people's cries for help stopped instantly, and at the same time they immediately reacted, realizing something, and came to the entrance of the cave to check. Sure enough, on the way back, Chen Luo was attracted by the cries of the two for help. As soon as he came to the entrance of the cave, he found a skeleton monitor lizard in front of the cave. Knowing that the two were in danger, Chen Luo went to the cave immediately. Rescue ahead. Dragging the monitor lizard's slender tail, the muscles all over his body tightened, and he exerted his strength suddenly. Under his enormous strength dozens of times that of ordinary people, this young skeleton monitor lizard had no room to resist at all, and was instantly dragged out by Chen Luo and thrown aside. Chen Luo, who knew the other party's habits, did not dare to let the other party go. If the other party brought more skeleton monitor lizards here, they would be really in danger. As soon as he thought of this, Chen Luo suddenly had a killing intent in his heart. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Chen Luo moved his feet and disappeared instantly. The next moment, when Chen Luo appeared again, he landed on the opponent's back, aimed at the opponent's neck, and threw out a punch with all his strength. Roar! Accompanied by the monitor lizard roaring with huge amounts of, under Chen Luo's full force, a huge amount of blood hole exploded in the opponent's neck instantly. Blood continued to flow out of the blood hole, and the severe pain instantly spread throughout the monitor lizard's body. Stimulated by the pain, the monitor lizard became more and more crazy, jumping and shaking its head constantly, as if trying to throw Chen Luo off its body. But its performance like this was completely painless to Chen Luo. The sharp nails of both hands stretched out instantly, piercing deeply into the opponent's body, and firmly attached to it, without any sign of being thrown off. At the same time, Chen Luo kept moving. One hand fixed his body, and the other hand kept waving, throwing towards the opponent's wound. Punch after punch, with each punch, the wound on the opponent's neck became bigger and bigger, and the speed of blood flow continued to accelerate. With the continuous loss of blood in the body, the monitor lizard finally lost its previous vitality, and the powerless he collapsed on the ground, gradually losing his breath. Well done. After confirming that the other party was completely dead, Chen Luo finally felt relieved, jumped off the other party's body, took a large piece of flesh and blood from the other party's body, and then walked towards the cave where Tony and the two were. Coming into the cave, Chen Luo looked at the two people whose faces were still pale, and said with some amusement, I said, aren't you all scared stupid? Hearing this, the two couldn't help rolling their eyes immediately. Do you think we are all like you? Please, we are just ordinary people. Can we not be afraid when we encounter such monsters? That's true. Chen Luo nodded in agreement, then changed the topic and said, then, if I transform you into vampires, what do you think? Hearing this, the two of them froze in place for an instant. Chapter 74 The Way to Escape, Self-Reliance. After a long while, the two finally came to their senses, looked at Chen Luo uncertainly, and said, are you serious? If you want. Chen Luo said with a smile. Hearing Chen Luo's answer, and recalling Chen Luo's previous performance, the two of them had a look of excitement in their eyes, but after that, they didn't know what they thought of, and finally shook their heads slowly and refused. This tempting proposition. Forget it. I think it's good to be an ordinary human being. Tony shrugged, but his face was extremely confident. And even if I am an ordinary person, with my genius-like brain, it may not be possible in the future. I will lose to you, Chen. I never doubted that. Chen Luo nodded slightly, his face full of approval. I'm quite interested, but you all know who I am. If I become a vampire, I will definitely be questioned by the people above. I don't want to cause such trouble. But if one day I don't want to work there, maybe I will consider this proposal at that time. Rhodes also stated his reasons, and Chen Luo also expressed his understanding. Then the three of them roasted the piece of flesh brought by Chen Luo on the fire. After eating and drinking enough, seeing that the two had recovered most of their physical strength, Chen Luo spoke again, talking about what he had just said. What I learned when fetching water 590. What? Chen, you mean you just saw a plane wreckage? Tony stood up suddenly, looked at Chen Luo with bright eyes and asked. That's right. Chen Luo nodded, and said thoughtfully in his eyes. Besides, it seems that the wreckage has been there for some years, and I think it must have been affected by the storm, so it crashed on this place. Island. These are not important. Tony didn't want to care about the cause of the plane crash, and now he was more concerned about whether he could find what he needed on the wreckage of the plane. After all, no matter how talented he is, without the corresponding tools and materials, he has nowhere to start. Therefore, after hearing the news from Chen Luo, he will appear so urgent. As long as he can find something in this wreckage, then his ability will undoubtedly play its due role. Where's the wreckage? Take me there. I'll find out if there's anything useful inside. Seeing Tony's eager face, Chen Luo immediately nodded in agreement without any hesitation. Then, under the leadership of Chen Luo, the three of them walked all the way, taking advantage of the cover of the night, Jedge. And after walking for about an hour, Chen Luo finally stopped. It's here. Chen Luo stepped forward, pointed to the huge figure not far away that had already been entwined by vines, and then turned to look at Tony. It's up to you, Tony. Tony nodded solemnly, then came to the front of the fuselage, reached out and gently stroked the wreckage in front of him. A glint of hope flashed in his eyes. Soon, half an hour passed. Just as Chen Luo and Rhodes were guarding around, suddenly, Tony's voice full of excitement came. Great! The plane's engine is still there. Excitedly, Tony came to Chen Luo and asked Chen Luo to help him disassemble the engine on the plane. Then he went to the console, disassembled some instruments with different shapes, and then greeted him and planned to leave. Is it enough to bring these things? Rhodes asked curiously. This is the only thing that can be used here. Tony nodded and replied. But as long as we have this engine, our trip will be worthwhile. Looking at the rust-stained engine beside him, Tony showed a sincere smile on his face. After some thinking, Tony finally decided on a way for the three of them to leave the island, that is to build another plane and fly out of the sea. But because of the unique environment in this sea area, if the plane's speed is not fast enough, it may be involved in the surging storm at any time and end up crashing. Therefore, after his calculations, in order for the plane to pass through this sea area as far as possible, the speed of the plane must reach at least Mach 2 to do so. And to achieve such a speed, a powerful enough the engine is essential. Although the engine that has been dismantled from the wreckage of the plane is quite old now, and some of its parts are even aging, this is not a problem for Tony at all. Able to meet your own requirements. Now that the most important parts have been obtained, what remains is to collect a large amount of steel to make the fuselage. The previous wreckage was too damaged and the steel could no longer be used, so it could only be collected elsewhere. Regarding this point, after seeing the wreckage of the plane that crashed on the island, Tony also had a glimmer of hope in his heart. Since the plane crash can be found here, there may be other wreckage left in other places on the island. Uncertain. If he really can't find it, then he can only try to find or to make steel by himself. But it will undoubtedly take more time to do so, and he will not try that method unless it is absolutely necessary. Although the road ahead is still a bit bumpy, but anyway, at least there is a little hope. After realizing that he might leave the island, Tony instantly became full of energy and his brain began to work rapidly. Soon, he had a new idea. When the three returned to the cave again, Tony immediately said to the two, Next, I plan to open up and expand this cave. In addition to being used for rest, I also plan to expand a workshop. In addition to modifying the engine, I also want to make some weapons to deal with those monsters. So it can be expected that we will probably stay here for quite a long time in the future. However, in order to successfully produce what I want, I still need a lot of materials. So regarding the collection of materials, Chen, I will trouble you. Chen Luo had no objection to this, and nodded immediately. What about me? Seeing this, Rhodes asked unwillingly. Rod, you are responsible for guarding outside. Oh, and if I need it, you can also come down and help me do chores. Tony said with a relaxed face. What? Rhodes complained with some displeasure. You asked me, a majestic major, to watch the door for you, and also work part-time as a miscellaneous? Are you underestimating me? Huh? Then you mean, you want to change with Chen? Rhodes' face froze, and he immediately said righteously, I suddenly found that the job of guarding the door is quite suitable for me. There is no need to change it. Hee hee. Chapter 75 Tony's Performance Moment. Now that it has been decided to station here temporarily, it is time to get back the steel plate that was placed on the beach. Then, taking advantage of the darkness, Chen Luo walked through the dense forest behind him alone. Under his full speed running, it took less than an hour to drag huge amounts of steel plates back to the original place. Immediately afterwards, because of Chen Luo, a strong and enduring perfect labor force, Tony also unceremoniously entrusted him with the task of digging the cave, and Chen Luo had no choice but to accept it. Fortunately, Chen Luo possesses the strength of several tons. With just one punch, a big hole explodes in the stone wall in front of him. Relying on the passivity of the steel body, there is no need to worry about the risk of injury. As Chen Luo keeps moving forward with punches, the space in front of him is getting bigger and bigger. Relying on such a simple and direct excavation method, Chen Luo successfully expanded a huge space of about 200 square meters in about 2 hours. The space is divided into two places, one for rest and the other for his Tony's workplace. Looking at the fruits of Chen Luo's labor, the two couldn't help but be amazed. Chen, I can swear. If you go to work as a construction worker, I'm afraid everyone else will lose their jobs. Facing Tony's ridicule, Chen Luo couldn't help but rolled his eyes and said, I'm really regretting it now. If I transform you all into vampires, won't I be required to do the hard work? Hearing this, Tony's smile faltered, and then he pretended not to hear it, and changed the subject naturally. By the way, Chen, don't bother you to help me deal with it. I need to do some madness first. Chen Luo. For some reason, he suddenly had a premonition that he might have to wear this tool man for quite a while. Although he was cursing and cursing, but facing Tony's request, Chen Luo still completed. Time passed by, and before he knew it, the sky was getting brighter. And after working all night, the results are very gratifying. At least the various tools Tony needs are finally successfully built with the help of Chen Luo, a toolman. In addition to the tools, Chen Luo and Rod are even more excited about the fact that Tony did not know what changes Tony made to the engine removed from the wreckage of the plane. Now it can act as a generator, and Tony in the overnight rush. This underground base has been covered by bright lights at this moment. With the full cooperation of Chen Luo, Tony's ability has been brought into full play. In just one night, the three of them have entered the electrical age by leaps and bounds. Now in this base, we can faintly see the modern society some shadows. Looking at the changes here, Chen Luo was also full of admiration for Tony's ability, and at the same time, he was full of confidence that they could successfully escape from the island. And Tony didn't let him down. In the following 2 days, as the materials brought by Chen Luo were gradually consumed, Tony also transformed these materials into weapons one by one, and placed them in front of Chen Luo. This is individual bazooka? Looking at the things on the ground, Rhodes subconsciously opened his eyes wide. Looking over one by one, his eyes became brighter and brighter. Submachine guns, grenades, good guys, even mortars? Pick it up and look at it carefully for a moment. As a soldier, Rhodes caressed the gun in his hand a little fondly and looked at the gun with excitement in his eyes. Tony said, "Can I take these out and try them out? Let me see how powerful they are. If they are really the same as the original version, we won't be powerless to fight back against the previous creatures." Facing Rhodes' inquiry, Tony shrugged, shook his head, and said, "Not yet. Although these weapons have been produced, there is still a lack of corresponding ammunition. Regarding gunpowder, corresponding raw materials are also needed to make them, and I don't have them yet." After saying this, Tony then turned his head to look in Chen Luo's direction and said seriously, "So, regarding the matter of finding raw materials, I'll leave it to you." Rubbing the center of his brows with a slight headache, Chen Luo said helplessly, "That's the only way to go." Because Chen Luo will go out to look for raw materials for making airplanes in the future, it is absolutely necessary for Tony to have a certain amount of self-protection after he leaves. Therefore, Tony will take the lead in starting his old business. After the weapons are all made, then Rhodes as a soldier will be useful. I believe that relying on the weapons in his hands, as long as he is not particularly unlucky to meet an overlord like King Kong or an adult skeleton monitor lizard, he should be fine. What danger? Ask for flowers. So, after getting the style of relevant raw materials and the generation environment from Tony, Chen Luo embarked on a journey of searching again. Then, nearly another week passed. During this period of time, relying on his own extraordinary speed, Chen Luo also successfully found the raw materials needed to make gunpowder after searching the entire area of 100 miles. After handing them over to Tony, after some careful configuration by him, the ammunition was finally successfully produced. Accompanied by a burst of intense gunshots, when the gunshots ended, Rhodes picked up the submachine gun, blew the white smoke from the muzzle, and then walked to the stone wall in front of him. Looking at the pitted stone wall in front of him, Rhodes couldn't help showing his eyes the color of wonder. 0. This power seems to be stronger than the original version. That's definitely. Behind Rhodes, Tony said confidently, "In order to deal with the creatures on this island, I deliberately changed the ratio of gunpowder to make the explosion more powerful. In this way, not only the guns, grenades, or individual bazookas in your hand are all more powerful than the original ones. With such a weapon in hand, if we encounter the skeleton monster from before again, we will definitely be able to deal with it." Seeing the confident faces of the two, Chen Luo thought for a while, but couldn't help but reminded, "I'm sorry, the skeleton monitor lizard you met before seems to be just a juvenile. If it grows to an adult size, it will be more than 20 meters long. I was looking for materials before. I have encountered one in my life, and it is not an easy task to deal with it." Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo told the two of the information he knew about the skeleton monitor lizard. "Tony, Rod, Shed, so you're saying that thing is still a pack creature? And as long as they're adults, each of them can hunt T-Rex alone. Isn't that a joke?" The two of them stared wide-eyed and looked at Chen Luo in disbelief. Chen Luo spread his hands and did not speak, but his actions already explained everything. Seeing this, the two couldn't help but gasp.